Chapter 341. Before the grand competition of the peaks began, Fulu School's head teacher Xianxia's short words were like a boulder thrown into a calm lake, stirring up thousands of waves. Being accepted as a disciple by a grand elder was not a shocking matter. At most, the disciples were a little envious. However, sitting to the left of the head teacher and being regarded as the future head of Fulu School was too inconceivable. Fulu School was one of the 6 Taoist sects. Its Taoist teachings were spread throughout the ancestral province, and it had a great influence in the cultivation world. The selection of the Fulu School's head teacher was a major matter for the entire cultivation world. After today, the name of Fulu School's Ling Jizi would spread throughout the cultivation world. After this unexpected matter spread, no one paid attention to this competition. Around the square, countless gazes swept back and forth over the young man sitting to the left of Xianxia, as if they wanted to see through him. Just what kind of ability did this person have to deserve such attention from Fulu School? Li Mu sat in his chair, feeling the gazes from all around him. At first he was not used to it, but now he was calm and collected. Xianxia saying these words before the large competition was completely out of Li Mu's expectations. In truth, his motives for joining Fulu School were impure. Whether it was for Li Qing, the empress, or to become fellow disciples with Lu Hanyan, in short, there was no reason for him to truly join Fulu School. Not to mention becoming the head teacher of Fulu School. At that time, this goal was simply an unrealistic dream for Li Mu. It was just an excuse he used to coax the empress. But who would have thought that after only a month, his dream would come true? The position of head teacher of Fulu School was not only about glory, status, and responsibility. There were thousands of disciples in the ancestral court, and countless outer disciples. As the head teacher of Fulu School, he had to be responsible for them. In addition, the allocation of the sect's resources, the strengthening and revitalization of the sect, all of this pressure rested on the head teacher alone. Once he became the headmaster, Li Mu would not only have to worry about the empress, but he would also have to worry about the Fulu School. There were all sorts of things happening in the imperial court, and it was enough to worry about the empress alone. It was better for the Fulu School to slip away as soon as possible. Before the first day of the competition ended, Li Mu planned to sneak away with Wanwan and Xiao Bai. After Lu Hanyan's closed-door cultivation ended, she would come to Fairy's capital to look for him. Wanwan was also alone here, so Li Mu planned to bring her back to Fairy's capital this time. This way she and Xiao Bai would have each other's company. As soon as the 3 of them left White Cloud Peak, several figures flew out from the main peak. Xianxia looked at Li Mu and asked, "Junior brother, where are you going?" Li Mu smiled and said, "I've been away from Fairy's capital for almost 3 months. And His Majesty has urged me many times. It's time for me to go back. If Master comes out of closed-door cultivation, I'll have to trouble you to inform him." Xianxia nodded and said, "Junior brother, you must cultivate diligently this time. Whether or not our Fulu School can prosper in the future will depend on you." Li Mu said awkwardly, "My cultivation is low now and I can't take on the responsibility of the school. In the next few decades, the school will have to rely on you, senior brothers and sisters." As soon as Li Mu finished speaking, another stream of light flew out from the main peak. The law bell became the size of a palm and flew around Li Mu, circling around him. During this time, with Li Mu's help, the cracks on the law bell had healed by half. Li Mu reached out his hand, and the law bell obediently landed in his palm. Li Mu patted the law bell lightly and said, "I'm leaving. I'll come and see you again in the future." The law bell flew up again, buzzed a few times and landed on his shoulder. Li Mu shook his head and said, "You have to stay on White Cloud Peak." "You can't go with me," Xianxia thought for a moment and said, "If the law bell is willing to follow you, then let it follow you." Li Mu looked at the law bell and gulped. He said, "That's not good. Without the law bell, what will happen to White Cloud Peak?" Xianxia said, "Don't worry. Our Fulu School hasn't fallen to the point where we need a spiritual treasure to protect us. Besides, the cracks on the law bell still need to be repaired by you. Only when the law bell is complete can it be used to its full potential," Li Mu said reluctantly. "All right then." After bidding farewell to Xianxia and the other first seats, the 3 of them and the law bell quickly flew away from White Cloud Peak. Hyun Jinko looked ahead until their figures disappeared. Then he said slowly, "It's good to let the law bell follow Junior Ling Jizi. If he encounters danger, it can protect him. However, senior brother, have you thought it through? The headmaster of Fulu School doesn't only need attainments in the Tao of Talismans or cultivation, but also responsibility." Xianxia smiled and said, "Since we've already taken a gamble, why don't we take another one? North County, Yangqiu County. In the courtyard of the old mansion, Li Mu looked at Su He and asked, "Are you really not coming back to the divine capital with me?" Su He shook her head and said, "I've been in the same place all these years and I'm getting tired of it. I don't want to be stuck in one place anymore. I want to go to other places and see other sceneries. I'll look for you when I'm tired of it." After 20 years, she no longer had any family or friends. Li Mu wanted her to return to the divine capital with him because he wanted her to have a home to return to. However, she had been trapped in the Bay of Clearwater for 20 years and couldn't take a single step out of that tiny place. She indeed needed to go out. The divine capital seemed lively, but it was also a prison. Once she stayed there for a long time, it would become another Bay of Clearwater to her. Li Mu looked at her and said, "Come back when you're tired. There'll always be a courtyard for you there." After having the last hot pot meal with Su He, she gave Li Mu a hug and then left with the two female ghosts, one big and one small. Li Mu naturally hoped that Su He could stay by his side. However, he also understood that after taking revenge, what she needed the most was freedom. Only complete freedom could heal the trauma in her heart for the past 20 years. After Su He left, the three of them didn't stay in the old mansion. Li Mu released a flying boat that Fu Daozi had gotten from the Green Bamboo Peak's first seat, Dong Shuzi. It carried Xiao Bai and Wan Wan and flew towards the divine capital. This flying boat was also a heaven-grade Dharma treasure. When driven by spiritual power, its highest flying speed was comparable to the sixth realm. Li Mu controlled the flying boat. When he was about to fly out of the North County, he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. Almost instantly, a fulu appeared in his hand. Driven by spiritual power, the fulu turned into a golden light shield that covered the flying boat. Boom! Several spiritual power attacks landed on the light shield. The light shield shook violently, and the flying boat also started to shake violently. High up in the sky wasn't suitable for fighting. Li Mu first sent Xiao Bai and Wan Wan into the flask heaven space. Then he controlled the flying boat to descend rapidly. When he landed on the ground, he put away the flying boat. Several figures appeared around him and surrounded him from several directions. A figure covered in ghostly qi looked at Li Mu and said eerily, "We've been guarding here for more than 2 months. We thought you were going to hide in the Fulu school for the rest of your life and not come out." Another brawny man with a towering demonic qi grinned and said, "You're finally willing to leave White Cloud Mountain. You made us wait for a long time." Li Mu looked at the two figures in front of him. One of them was a demon and the other was a ghost. Clearly they were both fifth realm powerhouses. Not only that, but the other 5 people beside and behind him also exuded an aura that was not weaker than the fifth realm. 7 fifth realm powerhouses. Even the Imperial Court's pursuit of Cui Ming didn't have such a big lineup. These 7 people all had a towering baleful aura, and their auras were strange. Clearly they were not orthodox cultivators. Li Mu glanced at them and asked, "You were sent by the demon sect?" The fifth realm ghost said, "You have good eyesight." Li Mu pursed his lips and said, "You 7 fifth realm powerhouses ganged up to bully me, a fourth realm powerhouse. Are all demonic cultivators as shameless as you?" The demon chuckled and said, "Cui Ming of the Meizong sect and Emperor Song of the Soul sect both died in your hands. We don't want to end up like them. Compared to our lives, what's face worth?" Beside Li Mu, a beautiful woman smiled and said, "Little brother, you'd better surrender. This time our 7 sects have joined forces. You won't be able to escape. Be obedient and you'll suffer less." At this moment, Li Mu still didn't know what was going on. There were only 10 sects in the demonic path. Moreover, the sects weren't completely united. Some sects even viewed each other as enemies. This time, 7 sects had joined forces and guarded the North County for more than 2 months just to stop him. Without Su He by his side, Li Mu was alone. Without the help of Fulu, he could at most fight to a draw with one of them. He had no chance of winning against the 7 of them. Li Mu looked at them and said, 7 against 1? What's the big deal? If you have the ability, come one by one." The ghost clearly didn't want to talk about fairness with Li Mu. He said, "This person can kill Cui Ming and Emperor Song. He must have some tricks up his sleeve. Let's attack together and split the rewards equally." Li Mu looked at them and said angrily, "You want to compete with me in terms of numbers?" As his voice fell, a stack of fulu appeared in his hand. Li Mu threw out the fulu. 18 fulu floated in the air and surrounded Li Mu and the 7 people. Illusory figures emerged from the talisman one after another. Every illusory figure had the aura of a 5th realm cultivator. The 7 people who were originally surrounding Li Mu were now surrounded by these 18 phantoms. The situation was instantly reversed. The 18 shadows that emerged from the fulu formed a formation. The 7 people's expressions changed. The ghost decisively formed 2 ghost claws and grabbed at Li Mu's vitals. Li Mu still had a Fulu in his hand. Facing the 2 ghost claws, Li Mu didn't dodge. He only activated the Fulu in his hand. His figure disappeared on the spot. The next time he appeared, he was already outside the formation. The Fulu school's research on Fulu had reached the peak. Talisman Daozi was a genius in this field. He was best at talisman formations. His talisman formations weren't inferior to the profound formations of the spirit formation sect. The ghost claws missed. Before the 7 people could react, the 18 shadows had already attacked them. One of the figures held a huge sword and slashed at the ghost. The ghost was hit by the huge sword and its figure immediately faded. It warned loudly, "Be careful, this sword specializes in injuring the soul." Another figure's hand seals changed. Within the formation, dense purple lightning fell from the sky. The lightning covered a wide area and almost covered every corner of the formation. The 7 people couldn't avoid it and could only resist it. At this moment, a flame rose under their feet. This flame wasn't an ordinary flame. It seemed to even burn their souls and soul. The 7 people joined forces to defend against the lightning above their heads and the flame under their feet. Within the formation, a green wind suddenly blew. When the wind blew on their bodies, it was as if it was cutting their flesh and bones. Even the strong demon couldn't help but roar in pain. The rest of the people were screaming in pain. Li Mu stood outside the formation with his arms crossed. He looked at the 7 people trapped in the formation and said coldly, "Scream. Even if you scream until your throat is broken, no one will come to save you." Chapter 342. There were many branches of Taoism: Fulu, pills, formations, martial Tao, divine arts. Under each major branch there were countless smaller branches. The cultivation world revered divine arts and Taoist techniques. Xuanzong, which was famous for its Taoist techniques and divine arts, was also the strongest among the 6 sects of Taoism. Comparatively speaking, Fulu school was a minority in the cultivation world. However, no one dared to look down on a minority like Fulu school. It was to the extent that most of the cultivators would rather compete with the disciples of the Xian sect in terms of divine path and arts or engage in close combat with the disciples of the South sect than to fight with the disciples of the Talisman sect. This was because they didn't know the trump cards of Fulu school disciples. Once they looked down on Fulu school disciples, they would end up in such an awkward situation. Li Mu, a small cultivator at the 4th realm, had trapped 7 cultivators at the 5th realm in a talisman array with 18 upper-grade earth-rank golden armor talismans and a short-distance teleportation talisman. Talisman Daozi deserved to be a genius in the Tao of talismans that was hard to come by in the last few hundred years of the talisman sect's history. This 18 Heavens Grand formation that was formed from 18 golden armor talismans was something he'd obtained inspiration from the 18 Nether Prison Grand formation of the Devil Tao, and he'd spent a few years of time researching it. This talisman array not only had a power equal to the 18 prison array, it also overcame the 18 prison array's weakness. The 18 prison array set up by Chu Jiang of Gojoseon required 18 ghost generals to sacrifice their lives. Moreover, their positions couldn't be moved. The 18 Heavens array only required 18 golden armor talismans. The array was portable and mobile. The power of the array was related to the Fulu's grade. 18 Earth high-grade Fulu could trap Dongxian. If there were 18 Heaven high-grade Fulu, it wouldn't be a problem to trap a Transcendence Realm cultivator. These golden armor talismans each had their own divine arts. The 7 people in the array had to endure 18 different attacks. They complained incessantly and could only work together to create a dermic power shield. They hid within the shield and passively defended. The ghost cultivator among the 7 was King Wuguan, a subordinate of the Nether Hell Saint. He also had the highest cultivation among the 7. As he used his mana to maintain the defensive shield, he observed the 18 heavenly soldiers and said, "Everyone, don't panic. The Fulu can only be maintained for a limited time. Once the spiritual energy is exhausted, it will lose its effect. As long as we hold on for a while longer, he will be at his wit's end." The 7 of them were caught off guard by the 18 heavenly soldiers. It was only then that they realized why the Heavenly Lord would place a bounty on a mere 4th realm cultivator. Although his own strength was weak, Fulu was really powerful. Chui Ming and Emperor Song deserved to die in his hands. Li Mu stood outside the array. Ever since the 7 of them gave up attacking and joined forces to resist, the situation on the battlefield had become a stalemate. Although the Fulu formation was simple and easy to carry, it also had its flaws. If the 18 capital heaven formation was set up by 18 creation realm experts, their mana would be endless. When it was exhausted, spiritual jades could be used to replenish it. The array could last for a long time. However, the Fulu's spiritual energy was limited and could not last indefinitely. The few of them joined forces to create such a protective shield. As time passed, it was possible that it could last until the Fulu's spiritual energy was exhausted. King Wuguan hid in the shield and looked at Li Mu mockingly. He said, "Emperor Song died in your hands like this. I don't believe it. Your Fulu's spiritual energy is endless. Let's see how long you can trap us." Of course, the Fulu's spiritual energy was not endless. At most, in 15 minutes, these heavenly soldiers would dissipate due to the exhaustion of their spiritual energy. Of course, Li Mu had more than one set of array talismans in his hands. Because a certain first seat really did not have anything good to give as a meeting gift, Talisman Daozi had extorted many talisman materials. Li Mu had used them to draw many Fulu formations. Just the 18 capital heaven formations array talismans alone was enough for him to gather 2 sets. However, Li Mu was not willing to use both sets of array talismans on these people from the demon sect. He whistled. Suddenly, something flew out of his ear. At first, it was so small that it was almost invisible. In an instant, it grew to about 10 feet tall. Li Mu whistled again. The enlarged Dao Bell suddenly charged into the array formation. Under the horrified gazes of the 7 people, it fiercely slammed into the protective shield that they had conjured. When the Dao Bell hit the shield, it was like an egg hitting a rock. It instantly collapsed. Puff. Among the 7 people, those with physical bodies spat out blood. Those without physical bodies had their souls dissipated. What was more serious was that without the protection of the shield, the 7 of them had to face the attacks of the 18 heavenly soldiers again. King Wuguan was already seriously injured. After the shield disappeared, he was caught off guard by a thunderbolt. His soul was even more scattered. He used the last of his spiritual energy to resist the burning of the Samadhi true fire. At this moment, a heavenly soldier had already slashed down with a giant golden sword in his hand. "No!" King Wuguan roared. His voice was filled with unwillingness and fear. As the giant sword fell, King Wuguan's soul collapsed and turned into pure spiritual energy. Of the 7 people from the demon sect, only 6 were left. Following that, the beautiful woman's physical body was finally destroyed after enduring several attacks. Her primordial spirit had just escaped when it was sucked into the Samadhi true fire. After letting out a series of shrill cries, it was quickly burned into nothingness. There was also a man in a red robe. When he saw that 2 of his companions had already been killed by the array formation, his body decisively exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist. It was unknown what mysteries this blood mist had, but it actually passed through the array formation directly. After escaping from the array formation, the blood mist didn't stop at all. Without hesitation, it fled into the distance. Li Mu looked at the blood mist in the distance and threw out another Fulu. The Fulu turned into a small purple person. Inside the small person's body, lightning flashed chaotically and emitted a terrifying pressure. With a step, it crossed a distance of several hundred feet and appeared in the blood mist. After the small lightning person exploded, an extremely shrill scream came from within the blood mist. The blood mist began to boil and eventually evaporate into nothingness. The blood sect expert's body and soul were also destroyed. After the protective shield was destroyed by the Dao Bell, 3 of the 7 demon sect experts were killed in the blink of an eye. The remaining 4 were scared out of their wits and joined forces to break out of the encirclement. However, in the face of 18 divine weapons of the same level as them, they could only hold on for a while before they followed in the footsteps of the previous 3. Not long after, the spiritual energy of the 18 Fulu was exhausted. The figures of the divine weapons slowly dissipated between the heaven and earth. Of the 7 people in the array formation, only the monster was left. Its intelligence had been erased and its eyes had lost their light. It was only left with a walking corpse. Li Mu walked over and pressed his hand on its head. Although the monster was at the 5th level, its intelligence had been erased. Li Mu could easily search its memories. 10,000 Illusions Lord, Bounty, Enlightenment page. After searching through the monster's memories, Li Mu's face was filled with astonishment. It turned out that after he killed the 10,000 Illusions Lord's avatar, the 10,000 Illusions Lord had issued a bounty for him. As time passed, the bounty on his head became heavier and heavier. At first, the bounty was only a precious treasure and personal guidance. Later, the bounty was increased. Anyone who captured or killed Li Mu would get a chance to comprehend the Dao page. This bounty had caused many people in the demon sect to fall into a frenzy. Li Mu didn't expect that the demon sect would also have a Dao page. If the Dao page in the hands of the 10,000 Illusions Lord was the same as the one in the Fulu school, then there might be some kind of inheritance in that Dao page. The Talisman Dao of the Fulu school, the Alchemy Dao of the Elixir Cauldron sect, the Array Dao of the Spirit Array sect, Xuanzong's Divine Power, the Martial Dao of the South sect, and the Artifact Refining Dao of the North sect were all comprehended and passed down by the seniors in the sect from the Dao pages. Which one did the 10,000 Illusions Lord have? Li Mu casually struck the monster with a bolt of lightning and turned it into ashes. He released the flying boat again and didn't let Wanwan and Xiaobai come out. The 10,000 Illusions Lord had spent a lot on him. The journey from the North County to the Divine Capital wouldn't be peaceful. Li Mu left on the flying boat. 15 minutes later, several figures rushed over from afar. There are strong traces of a battle here. Did King Wuguan and the others beat us to it? Damn it, this place is too close to Baiyin Mountain. We were worried that the Fulu school would discover us, so we stayed a little further away. I didn't expect them to beat us to it. Chase. We still don't know who will win. King Wuguan and the others have just experienced a great battle and might not be able to unleash their full strength. If we join forces, we won't be afraid of them. Only one person can comprehend the Dao pages. How are we going to split them? Let's capture that Li Mu first. 3 days later. Jianghu County. Li Mu flew across the sky on the flying boat. His clothes were a little messy, and a few strands of his hair fluttered in the wind. He looked a little wretched. It would only take a little more than a day to travel from the North County to the Divine Capital with the flying boat at full speed. However, 3 days had passed, and Li Mu was still more than half the distance to the Divine Capital. The people from the demon sect clearly knew his whereabouts. Along the way, Li Mu was blocked by the demon sect's experts several times. More than 50 people from the demon sect had died in his hands. Among them, there were more than 20 people who were at the 5th realm. Because of this, Li Mu's Fulu had decreased by more than half. After all, his cultivation was only at the divine power level. If he encountered several 5th realm experts at the same time, he could only rely on his Fulu to win. Comprehending the Dao pages was too attractive to cultivators. Along the way, Li Mu didn't only encounter people from the demon sect. Even many cultivators who weren't from the demon sect couldn't resist the temptation of the Dao pages. Li Mu didn't hold back at all to anyone who wanted to take his life. This was also the reason why his Fulu was depleted so quickly. 2 months ago, because of the myriad illusion lord's bounty, there were people from the demon sect lying in ambush along the way from the North County to the Divine Capital. Li Mu advanced along the original route and directly entered their encirclement several times. Therefore he simply chose to take a detour. Although this would waste a lot of time, the speed of the flying boat was comparable to that of Dongxian. As long as they weren't ambushed halfway, they wouldn't be able to catch up to Li Mu. Most of the people who blocked the way were at the 4th realm and 5th realm. He hadn't encountered any 6th realm experts yet, but Li Mu didn't let down his guard at all. The temptation of the Dao pages was too great. It was possible that 6th realm experts wouldn't be tempted. After taking a detour, he didn't encounter any more people from the demon sect. Li Mu accelerated the flying boat but suddenly stopped at a certain moment. A figure floated in the air a few hundred feet in front of him. That person looked to be in his 20s. He wore a long black robe and his hair was tied up in a bun. His appearance was somewhat scholarly. His hands were clasped behind his back as he stood facing Li Mu. His gaze was indifferent. The moment he saw this person, Li Mu became extremely vigilant. He just stood there casually. There wasn't a trace of spiritual power fluctuation on his body. He looked no different from a mortal. But he definitely wasn't a mortal. The only possibility was that his cultivation was 2 realms higher than Li Mu's. That person looked at Li Mu and said, "I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Li Mu stood on the flying boat. Some memories belonging to the 1,000 Illusions venerable master surfaced in his mind. Li Mu wasn't unfamiliar with this person. To be precise, he wasn't unfamiliar with the 1,000 Illusions venerable master. The 10 sects of the demon sect didn't have a sect master. They were led by the Grand Elder. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, Emperor Song, and King Wuguan's master was this person. He was the Soul sect's Grand Elder, the Nether Saint. Although this person looked young, he was actually an old monster who had entered the 6th realm many years ago. His strength was considered average among the 6th realm. This time he actually took action personally. Li Mu was very clear about his strength. Not to mention that Suhi wasn't here. Even if Suhi was here and the two of them combined, they still wouldn't be a match for the Nether Saint. But Li Mu wasn't worried. Although he couldn't defeat the Nether Saint couldn't do anything to him. With the Dao Bell, even if he encountered a transcendent, Li Mu would be in an invincible position. He put away the flying boat and floated in the air. At a certain moment his temperament changed. He looked at the Nether Saint and asked, "We haven't seen each other for a few years. Nether Saint, don't you recognize me?" As Li Mu's voice fell, the Nether Saint was dazed for a moment. Then his expression changed greatly. He said in shock, You are the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master. Weren't your body and soul destroyed?" Chapter 343. Li Mu floated in the air with his hands behind his back as he looked at the Nether Hell Saint from afar. After a moment of shock, the Nether Hell Saint quickly regained his senses and said, "Qian Huan's soul lamp has been extinguished, and his soul has already dispersed. You can't be Qian Huan. You have obtained his memories." The Nether Hell Saint wasn't as gullible as Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. After being exposed, Li Mu decisively took out the mid-grade Heaven-tier golden armor talisman. After the Fulu burned, it condensed into a golden-armored figure that emitted a sixth realm aura. With a thought from Li Mu, the golden armor talisman flew towards the Nether Hell Saint with a huge sword. At the same time, Li Mu also released the flying boat and shot into the distance. The Nether Hell Saint wanted to give chase but was blocked by the golden-armored divine soldier. The Nether Hell Saint watched Li Mu disappear from his sight from afar. He reached out his hand and condensed a black soul sword in his hand. He then clashed with the golden-armored divine soldier's golden giant sword. On the flying boat, Li Mu used all his strength to activate this treasure and quickly fled forward. Even though he was no longer who he used to be, a powerhouse of the 6th level was still an insurmountable mountain to him. The Nether Hell Saint's strength was considered average among the 6th realm experts. That golden armor talisman wasn't a true 6th realm expert, and the spiritual power in the Fulu was limited. It couldn't stop him for long. Along the way, Li Mu met many people from the Demon Dao, but he didn't expect that even the 6th realm Nether Hell Saint, a grand elder of a sect, would be summoned. With his current strength he could handle anyone below the 6th realm. In order to hone his combat ability, Li Mu didn't send a message to White Cloud Mountain. Along the way he was more proficient in both divine arts and the use of the Fulu. But when the Nether Hell Saint attacked, he couldn't handle it alone. Li Mu steered the flying boat and flew forward at full speed for about an hour. At a certain point he sensed another powerful aura behind him. "You can't escape," the Nether Saint's sinister voice sounded from behind. As soon as he said that, a long spear condensed from black chi shot out from behind. It seemed to be constantly traversing space. It was faster than the flying boat, heading straight for Li Mu. Li Mu whistled and a giant bell instantly enveloped his body. Dong. The black chi spear smashed into the giant bell, creating a deafening sound. The spear collapsed and the surrounding 300 meters was filled with sand and stones. Trees were uprooted and a huge shockwave continued to spread out. Li Mu was not affected at all within the Dao Bell, but the Nether Hell Saint was already approaching. The Nether Hell Saint was outside the bell and could only see the giant bell. He couldn't see the situation inside the bell. His face was filled with surprise. The spear he threw seemed casual, but it was actually his full-strength attack. Everything within 1,000 feet of him was turned into ruins by the recoil, but the bell was unharmed. He condensed another soul sword in his hand and slashed at the Dao Bell. Dong. Another deafening sound rang out. The soul sword in the Nether Hell Saint's hand dissipated, and his body was also forced back a few steps. The defense of the bell was beyond imagination. The Nether Hell Saint retreated 30 meters and countless black chi gushed out from his body. The black chi condensed into several giant pythons, which twisted their bodies and crashed into the giant bell. Dong, dong, dong. The giant pythons dissipated when they crashed into the bell, but the giant bell remained in its original position, undamaged. Lord Netherhell's expression darkened, and he tried to attack it several more times, but it was still to no avail. The sturdiness of this bell was beyond his imagination. Even with his 6th realm power he was actually unable to do anything to it. The recoil from the bell caused his own aura to become unstable instead. He looked at the bell again and finally discovered something. His body transformed into a ball of black chi and completely enveloped the bell. Li Mu stood inside the bell and observed the Nether Hell Saint's every move. The Nether Hell Saint's black chi completely enveloped the Dao Bell. Li Mu didn't know what the Nether Hell Saint was doing, but in the next moment his expression changed. Wisps of black qi were seeping in from the cracks on the Dao bell. Li Mu didn't hesitate to throw out that set of array talismans again. The 18 golden armored soldiers appeared again and formed a talisman array, trapping the Dao bell and the black qi in it. One of the soldiers slashed at the black qi with his giant golden sword. Another soldier formed hand seals with both hands, and thunder exploded in the black qi. As for the other 2 soldiers, one transformed into a frost giant, and the other into a flame giant. They pounced at the black qi. The 18 soldiers each used their own abilities. The black qi rolled and the Nether Hell Saint appeared again. He had 2 soul swords in his hands, and one of them shattered the giant golden sword of the soldier. After withstanding several thunderbolts, the Nether Hell Saint only had an unstable aura. He swung the other sword, and the frost giant and the flame giant immediately collapsed. When the 2 soldiers reformed again, their bodies were much dimmer. The great heavenly array could trap a cultivator who had just entered the 6th realm, but it was still difficult to trap a long-established expert like the Nether Hell Saint. Moreover, Li Mu could see from the Dao bell that the Nether Hell Saint seemed to be very effective against these divine soldiers that didn't have physical bodies. In less than 15 minutes, this talisman array would run out of spiritual power and dissipate. At this moment, Li Mu's Fulu was almost used up. He had used all his trump cards and he had no other choice but to hide in the Dao bell. Li Mu stretched out his hand, and a jade talisman appeared in his palm. The Empress had given it to him before he left the divine capital. The Empress didn't tell Li Mu what the talisman was for. She only told him that he could crush the talisman in an emergency. Boom. At this moment, a loud sound came from outside the Dao bell. Li Mu looked outside the Dao bell and realized that the Nether Hell Saint had already broken the talisman array. It was much faster than he had expected. The Nether Hell Saint floated in front of the Dao bell and sized it up. He said, "This Dao bell is a good treasure, but it's a pity that it's incomplete." The Dao bell buzzed and slammed toward the Nether Hell Saint. The Nether Hell Saint disappeared and the Dao bell's attack missed. When the Nether Hell Saint appeared again, he was already on top of the Dao bell. He pressed his palm down and the Dao bell was pressed to the ground. Li Mu looked up and crushed the jade talisman in his hand without hesitation. The jade talisman shattered and it seemed like nothing had happened. However, the Nether Hell Saint's expression changed. He immediately retreated a few hundred feet and looked in Li Mu's direction with vigilance. The space in front of the Dao bell fluctuated, and a figure stepped out of the void. "Your Majesty, the Empress of the Great Zhou." The voices of Li Mu and the Nether Hell Saint could be heard. One was surprised while the other was frightened. However, the latter's fear quickly turned into calmness. The Nether Hell Saint looked at the illusory figure of the woman in front of him and heaved a sigh of relief. He said, "So it's just a divine clone. If your true body came, I would naturally retreat. However, a mere divine clone that has just reached the 6th stage of cultivation, what can you do to me?" The Empress looked at him indifferently and said, "You are not worthy for me to come personally." The Nether Hell Saint reached into his chest and took out a pair of ghastly hook-shaped weapons. He smiled at the Empress and said, "I have long wanted to see what the Empress of the Great Zhou is capable of." As he spoke, his figure had already disappeared from where he stood. Li Mu's mind moved, and the Xianxia sword appeared in his hand. He threw the Xianxia sword forward and said, "Your Majesty, take this." The Empress stretched out her hand, and the Xianxia sword flew into her hand. She casually swung her sword, and the Nether Hell Saint's hooks appeared from the void and collided with the Xianxia sword. The ground within a radius of several hundred feet immediately collapsed. Li Mu hid in the Dao bell and could not see the 2 figures. He could only feel waves of powerful magic power fluctuations. His surroundings were already in a mess because of the aftermath of the battle. He was in the center of the battle between 2 6th-stage cultivators. If it were not for the protection of the Dao bell, he would have been severely injured even if he did not die. With Li Mu's cultivation, he could not even see the 2 figures clearly. Naturally, he did not know who had the upper hand. However, the Nether Hell Saint was the true body, and the Empress was only a divine clone. A divine clone could not exist for long. Li Mu's mind spun rapidly. He decisively walked out of the Dao bell and shouted, "Your Majesty, enter my body." In the void, a figure paused for an instant. Then, without hesitation, it returned and entered Li Mu's body. Li Mu's aura instantly surged. From the divine arts realm, he quickly broke through the creation realm and finally gave off the aura of the early stage of Dongxian. The Nether Hell Saint floated high in the sky and looked down at Li Mu. Although the aura on his body was similar to the Empress of Great Zhou's divine clone, the current Li Mu gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Li Mu raised his head and looked at the Nether Hell Saint. He cracked his knuckles and said, "It's my turn, Yidu's ghost region." It was a place that was forever shrouded in darkness and could not see the sun. In a palace that was filled with a ghostly aura, a weak light shone. In front of the palace, 2 rows of ghostly blue lights flickered with a strange light. There were 2 rows of lights. The first row only had 1 light, and the second row had 7 lights. That 1 light was brighter than the other 7 lights combined. 2 ghostly figures stood in front of the palace and conversed softly. His Highness Chu Jiang of Gojoseon is dead. His Highness Emperor Song is dead. His Highness King Wuguan is also dead. There are only 7 Yama kings of the 10 halls left under the saint. I wonder who will replace them in the future. When the saint returns, he will probably fly into a rage again. I hope it won't affect us. The 2 ghostly figures conversed softly and turned back to look at the light that was burning the brightest. Fear appeared on their faces. In the next moment, the fear on their faces turned into astonishment. The light that was burning peacefully suddenly started to shake violently. What happened? Could it be that the saint is fighting with someone? The saint might have met a 6th realm strong practitioner of the righteous path. The 2 ghostly figures' faces were filled with fear as they quickly ran into the palace. However, before they could reach the front of the palace, the light that was burning the brightest in the first row suddenly extinguished after shaking violently for a while. The 2 ghostly figures fell to the ground. Their faces were filled with astonishment, and their voices were filled with boundless fear. The saint has fallen. Chapter 344. The 10 sects of the Devil Path were spread all over Ancestral State. Among them, the Soul Sect was located in the ghost region of Yudu. At this moment, the Soul Palace was in chaos. A soul lamp was a soul flame that was ignited using the soul as a guide. Its function was no different from a life talisman. If the soul lamp burned, the owner's life would not be in danger. If the soul lamp extinguished, it meant that the owner's soul had dissipated. All the experts of the Soul Sect, including the great elder Nether Saint Monarch, had left their soul lamps in the Soul Palace. More than half a year ago, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's soul lamp extinguished. 3 months ago, Emperor Song's soul lamp extinguished. 3 days ago, King Wuguan's soul lamp went out. Today, the Nether Saint's soul lamp was extinguished. The great elder was the faith of the sect. The sudden extinguishing of his soul lamp had caused a great uproar in the Soul Sect. Countless disciples of the Soul Sect were at a loss when they heard that the great elder's soul lamp had extinguished. The entire Soul Palace was in chaos. How did the grand elder's soul lamp go out? Could it be that the great elder has really fallen? The great elder has fallen. What's going to happen to the Soul Sect? What are we going to do? Shut up. An angry roar came from outside the palace, causing the chaos in the Soul Palace to calm down. The ghosts saw a tall and sturdy figure floating in from outside the palace. They all bowed and said loudly, "Greetings, Your Highness King Qingguang." King Qingguang walked to the front of the hall and looked at the extinguished soul lamp in the first row. His face darkened completely. As long as the owner's soul was not extinguished, his soul lamp would last forever. If the sage's soul lamp was extinguished for no reason, it meant that he had already died. It was very likely that he had encountered a righteous expert when he went out to investigate the cause of Emperor Song's death. King Qingguang looked at the extinguished soul lamp again and said in a deep voice, "King Pingdeng, King Kakravarti." 2 ghostly figures floated in from outside the palace and said, "Big brother," King Qingguang said, "something has happened to the holy monarch. I'm going to report to the sacred sect. You 2 stay here and guard the Soul Sect. Don't let anything happen here." The 2 of them replied in unison, "Yes." King Qingguang floated out of Soul Palace and quickly disappeared. Under the pacification and suppression of the King of Equality and the King of Kakravarti, the chaos in the Soul Sect gradually subsided. At the entrance of Soul Palace, the 2 little ghosts let out a light breath. I didn't expect that an existence like a saint would actually fall. I don't know who killed the Saint Monarch. The sage has fallen. King Wuguan's death cannot be blamed on us. What you said makes sense. The death of the first elder was a huge matter. Naturally, it was impossible to hide it. Soon, through a special method of communication, the various demonic Dao sects learned of this matter. Because of this news, all of the demonic path subsects were in an uproar. What? Yu Ming has fallen? How is that possible? Who would have the ability to kill him? Could it be that he encountered a righteous 7th realm cultivator? Damn it. First it was the 1,000 illusions and now it's the netherworld. Do they really think that our demon sect is easy to bully? In the past year, the demon sect had lost 2 first elders. Among them, the 1,000 illusions of the corpse sect had already reached the peak of the 6th realm. He had hopes of peaking into the Transcendence Great Tao. The Sage sect had high hopes for him. Once the 1,000 illusions of the 1,000 illusions advanced, the demon sect would have another supreme expert. Although the Netherworld Saint's strength was not as strong as the 1,000 illusions of the 1,000 illusions, he was still in charge of a sect. He was one of the core higher-ups of the demon sect. His fall made the strongest Sage sect elder of the 10 sects furious. He ordered all of the demon sect disciples to investigate this matter. After leaving the ghost region of Yudu, the Netherworld Saint did not hide his tracks. Some of the demon sect disciples in the north region knew that the first elder of the soul sect was chasing after Li Mu, who was wanted by the Heavenly Lord, because of the death of his subordinate. Later on, a disciple provided information that he had seen the battle between the Netherworld Saint and Li Mu from afar in Jianghu County. However, because he was afraid of being affected by their battle, he hid from afar. He originally thought that the bounty this time would be taken by the Lord Saint. Who would have thought that the first elder of the soul sect would also die in the hands of Li Mu? This news was no different from a sudden clap of thunder. It shocked many people. Using this matter, the various demon sect sects exchanged information and found out that in these 3 days, dozens of demon sect disciples had died in the hands of Li Mu. Among them there was no lack of 5th realm experts. More than 25th realm experts and 1 6th realm first elder. After knowing this number, those demon sect disciples who were still dreaming of capturing or killing Li Mu alive to obtain the Heavenly Lord's reward instantly extinguished this thought. Although the reward was great, one still needed to be alive to receive it. Even the first elder of the soul sect, a 6th realm expert, had died in body and soul. How could they be stronger than the Netherworld Saint? After this incident, Li Mu's name had become a kind of deterrent in the demon sect's 10 sects. Xin, Du, Li residence. Li Mu lay on a chair as Xiaobai massaged his shoulders. Wan peeled the seedless grapes from the west region that the Empress had rewarded him and fed him. It was good to have one more person at home. It was really a wise decision for him to bring Wan to Shindu. His days in Shindu were much more leisurely and comfortable. After returning from the north region, Li Mu wasn't in a hurry to go to the secretariat. Instead, he enjoyed the last of his leisure time at home. Of course, he didn't spend all his time enjoying the service of Wan and Xiaobai. After returning to Shindu, Li Mu spent most of his time repairing the Dao Bell. Because of his own sins, he almost died in the hands of the Netherworld Saint. The Dao Bell enveloped Li Mushi. Other than the bell's body, the bottom of the bell was also impenetrable. The only flaw was the crack on the bell's body, which had almost allowed the Nether Hell Saint to take advantage of it. In the end, he had to crush the jade talisman that the Empress had given him to allow the Empress's avatar to descend. If one were to say that the Empress doted on him, the bunch of old men from the Fulu school wouldn't be so considerate. After being possessed by the Empress avatar, Li Mu's cultivation temporarily reached the early stage of the 6th realm. With the help of Dao techniques, he was almost invincible below the 7th realm. The Netherworld Saint was only at the middle stage of the 6th realm. Under the joint attack of Li Mu and the Empress, he couldn't even escape. Li Mu had never thought that he would have the chance to kill a 6th realm expert with his own hands. In terms of strength, people like Lord Thousand Illusions and the various peak masters were unreachable in his eyes. However, when he was possessed by the Empress, Li Mu even developed a kind of confidence that he could compete with a transcendent being. Of course, this confidence also disappeared without a trace when the Empress avatar left. Back then, Cui Ming sacrificed his blood essence and lifespan to allow the 10,000 Illusions Lord to descend. The Empress avatar descended without any sacrifice. She used her own great magic power to break open space and force the avatar to travel thousands of miles. The Empress herself also paid a considerable price because of this. After Li Mu returned to the Immortal's capital, she went into seclusion and didn't hold morning court for 2 times. At a certain moment, the space in the courtyard fluctuated, and a familiar figure appeared before Li Mu's eyes. Xiaobai ran over quickly and said happily, "Big Sister Zhou, you're here." She pulled Wan and introduced her to Zhou Yi. "Big Sister Zhou, this is the Big Sister Wan I always tell you about." Wan was different from Xiaobai. After knowing that the beautiful Big Sister in front of her was the Empress of the Great Zhou, she was a little restrained. She grew up in the Immortal's capital and had a very strong sense of hierarchy. She didn't dare to imagine that Xiaobai actually dared to call the Empress Big Sister Zhou. After a while, she pulled Xiaobai into the room. Li Mu gave up his seat and said, "Your Majesty, have some grapes." Zhou Yi sat in Li Mu's seat and said, "The imperial court found out from the spies in the demon sect that some elders of the demon sect were furious because of the Nether Saint's death. It's best that you stay in the Immortal's capital from now on and don't go out casually." Li Mu nodded and then asked, "Is your Majesty's injury all right?" Zhou Yi shook her head and said, "It's fine. I'll be fine after a few days of rest." When a transcendent expert sent their avatar from afar, if they didn't sacrifice others, they would have to sacrifice themselves. The myriad illusion monarch naturally wouldn't sacrifice his own cultivation for Cui Ming. If he knew that the Empress didn't hesitate to get injured for him, Li Mu would also be willing to stab himself a few times like Cui Ming. Li Mu bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for saving my life." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "You're working for me. I won't let anyone hurt you." Li Mu was slightly moved. As the Empress of a country, she was willing to go to such extent for a subject. This made him feel that all his previous efforts were worth it. Night. In a dream, Li Mu dreamt that he fought with the Nether Saint for dozens of rounds and still wasn't a match for him. Just when he was about to lose his life, a familiar figure suddenly descended from the sky. The Empress hugged Li Mu, who was sent flying by the Nether Saint, and landed on the ground. She then raised her hand and gently pointed at the Nether Saint. With this point, the Nether Saint's soul body directly collapsed and dissipated between heaven and earth. The Empress looked at Li Mu and said gently, "I won't let anyone hurt you." Li Mu sat up from the bed with a blank expression. Chapter 345. Li Mu sat on the bed for 2 hours. After careful analysis, he felt that the reason he kept having these kinds of dreams was because he relied on the Empress too much. Other people were always the heroes saving the damsel in distress, but he was always waiting for the damsel to save him. Over time, his subconscious would be affected. Li Mu didn't want to completely fall to the point of relying on a woman's protection. He decided to take the initiative to do something. If he could make the Empress rely on him, perhaps she would be the one having these kinds of dreams in the future. But she was the Empress of the Great Zhou, and also a 7th realm cultivator. If she couldn't handle someone, Li Mu couldn't either. How could he become the Empress's reliance? After deep thought, the only thing he could rely on was probably his cooking skills. Although his cooking skills couldn't compare to the imperial chefs in the palace, it was obvious that the Empress was used to eating delicacies and preferred his home-cooked meals. When she completely got used to Li Mu's cooking and couldn't leave Li Mu's side, it would be time for him to take the initiative. After the morning court session ended, the Empress's figure appeared in the courtyard of the Li Manor as usual. Li Mu rolled up his sleeves and said enthusiastically, "Your Majesty, you're out of court. What do you want to eat today?" "I'll make it for you." Zhou Yi thought for a moment and said, "Crucian carp tofu soup?" "Okay, Your Majesty, please wait here for a moment." Li Mu smiled and walked towards the kitchen. Halfway there he suddenly stopped. He realized that he seemed to have gone in the wrong direction. He was a favored official. Why did he always do what a favored concubine should do? He made an official into a concubine. No wonder he often had those strange dreams at night. So this was the reason. If this continued, not only would the situation not improve, but it would also worsen. It was never too late to mend the pen after the sheep were lost. Li Mu waved to the 2 girls in the corner and said, "Xiaobai Wanwan, you 2 go cook. I have something to discuss with Sister Zhou." Li Mu walked to the Empress and sat down. He asked, "Your Majesty, how are you suppressing your inner demons?" Zhou Yi glanced at Li Mu and said, "He hasn't appeared for a long time." When Li Mu heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief. The heart demon of the 7th realm was extraordinary. Since ancient times, there have been many powerhouses in the upper realm who were not destroyed by the enemy but were destroyed by the heart demon. Li Mu didn't want the Empress to die because of the heart demon. When it came to inner demons, the clear heart art could only treat the symptoms but not the root cause. In the end, she still had to rely on herself. Speaking of the art of tranquility, Li Mu had originally planned to draw some high-level Fulu with the help of the Empress's mana after returning to the Immortal's capital. Later, he realized that he had already taught the art of tranquility to the Empress, so she could draw it herself. High-level Fulu was very attractive to cultivators. This was a rare cultivation resource. A saint-level Qinji talisman could allow a half-step transcendence cultivator to work for the imperial court for several years. The Qinji talisman didn't just increase their lifespan, it also increased their chances of breaking through to the transcendence realm. Heaven-level and earth-level Fulu weren't very attractive to 6th realm cultivators, but they were still very attractive to those below the 6th realm. There were very few 6th realm cultivators. Most of the 4th and 5th realm cultivators were the mainstays of the cultivation world. Li Mu thought for a moment and looked at the Empress. He said, "The art of tranquility that I taught your majesty can not only be used to calm your Dao heart, but also to increase the success rate of drawing a talisman. As long as there are enough treasures to make talisman fluid, your majesty can easily draw saint-level Fulu with your cultivation. You can use the Fulu to recruit more powerhouses for the imperial court." The Empress looked at him and said, "I have already discovered that this art can increase the success rate of drawing a talisman. However, it seems to be limited to Fulu below the heaven level. Those above the heaven level will still fail." This time it was Li Mu's turn to be surprised. He knew the effects of the art of tranquility better than anyone else. Not to mention the heaven level, even the saint level could be easily drawn as long as there was enough transcendence energy to support it. Why didn't it work when it came to the Empress? Li Mu was puzzled. He asked, "Your Majesty has already tried it?" The Empress nodded. After confirming with the Empress again, Li Mu fell into deep thought. It was the same art. There was no reason to favor boys over girls. The Empress looked at him and said, "You were the one who drew the heaven-level Fulu on Mount Baiyun." Li Mu nodded and said, "Your Majesty already knows." Li Mu didn't tell her much about the details of the trial, but he couldn't hide it from her. The Empress was silent for a moment. Suddenly she asked, "The master that you mentioned called Laozi is actually yourself, right?" Li Mu was shocked. He hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, why do you say that?" The Empress glanced at him and said softly, "When Dao techniques are first born, they will be recognized by heaven and earth. Only their creator can unleash their strongest power. It's the same for the art. This is the rule of heaven and earth. There is only one reason why my art of tranquility is inferior to yours." The Empress's words made Li Mu think of Xiaoyu. Although he couldn't use Xiaoyu's Dao technique didn't have any effect on him. Li Mu could dissipate her Taoist technique with just a thought. In other words, whether it was the art of tranquility or the 9 syllables, as long as it was Li Mu who brought them to this world for the first time, he was their creator. Even if the people who came after could learn it, they would never be able to reach his level. Using his Dao technique to attack him was suicide. However, the fact that he didn't have a master was exposed in front of the Empress. Li Mu said awkwardly, "Your Majesty actually..." Zhou Yi waved her hand and said, "This is your secret. You don't have to explain it to me." Li Mu looked at her and said, "There are some things that I can't tell you, Your Majesty. However, I swear by heaven that my heart has always been with Your Majesty. I am loyal to Your Majesty and am willing to go through fire and water for Your Majesty. I won't hesitate to die 1,000 times, Zhou Yi said. "I don't want you to go through fire and water. Go and cook. I like to eat the dishes you make." Li Mu rolled up his sleeves again. Okay. 2 days later in the Secretariat. It had been many days since he returned to the capital. It was even longer than his 3-month holiday. After taking Wan to see her old friends at the wonderful music lane and accompanying her and Xiaobai to walk around Du for 2 days, Li Mu finally stepped through the gates of the Secretariat. After the imperial examinations ended, the Empress transferred him to the Secretariat. His official position was the Secretariat Censor. His rank was not high, but it was extremely important. He usually participated in national affairs. After the guard at the door reported, Louis walked out of a yamen and said, "Lord Li, you're finally here." Li Mu saluted him and said, "We'll be officials in the same yamen in the future. Please take care of me, Assistant Minister Liu." Louis smiled and said, "We're all colleagues. We should take care of each other. I'll take Lord Li to your yamen." In the Secretariat there were 6 Secretariat censors. They were the backbone of the yamen. Each of them had a yamen that corresponded to the affairs of the 6 ministries. Li Mu took over Lu Yi's original position and was in charge of the Ministry of Justice. The Secretariat censors didn't specifically interfere with the operations of the ministries. However, they had the responsibility of supervising and guiding the official affairs of the ministries. Li Mu's yamen was very large. When he walked in, the table in the yamen was neatly piled with memorials. Louis said, "Lord Li, you haven't been in the yamen for the past 3 months. These memorials have to be dealt with as soon as possible. There are many affairs in the Secretariat. If you don't deal with them in time, they will pile up." Li Mu nodded and said, "I know." Louis smiled and said, "Lord Li, you just came to the yamen. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." After seeing Lu Yi off, Li Mu sat down and used a short time to familiarize himself with the unfamiliar surroundings. Then he began to deal with the memorials on the table. Among the 6 ministries, the Ministry of Justice had the most affairs. Especially after the law reform, the serious cases in each county had to be submitted to the Ministry of Justice for review, then to the Secretariat for review, and finally to the Empress for approval. Most of the memorials on Li Mu's table were such memorials. Human lives were at stake. Li Mu read through these reports very carefully. If there were any suspicious points or omissions, he would put them aside and wait until he went back and re-examined them. As for those that had solid evidence, they were just going through the process. They would be put aside and handed over to the Empress for her approval. There were a lot of memorials piled up in the past 3 months. Li Mu had read less than half of them from the yamen to the yamen. He picked up the last one and prepared to go home after reading it. The rest of the memorials should be finished in 2 days. Li Mu opened the memorial. This memorial was from Danyang County. It was sent by the county chief of Danyang County. In the memorial, it said that a few months ago, the county chief of Ani County of Danyang County was assassinated. Danyang County had reported this case to the Ministry of Justice several times, but there was no response. They had no choice but to submit the memorial directly to the Secretariat. Li Mu put away the memorial with a puzzled expression. The assassination of a 7th-grade official was related to the dignity of the imperial court. The death of the county chief of Anyang County had caused a huge uproar in the North County. What was the Ministry of Justice doing? Such a big thing, but they didn't report it. Chapter 346. P.S. It's almost midnight. I can't finish writing. This chapter has 2001 words. I'll update it first and then write a few hundred words. You can subscribe first and refresh the chapter half an hour later or tomorrow morning. The extra words won't cost you anything. It took Li Mu 3 days to deal with the backlog of memorials during this period of time. Other than the 2 memorials beside him, the table in front of him was empty. The contents of the 2 memorials were very similar. The county magistrate of Ani County of Danyang County was assassinated a few months ago. A month later, a deputy county magistrate of Jianghu County of Hanyang County was also assassinated. Although there were many places in Great Zhou where demons and ghosts wreaked havoc and disturbed the lives of the people, it was rare for an official to be killed. Murdering an official of the imperial court was a capital offense. The Ministry of Justice had always been strict in investigating such acts that challenged the authority of the imperial court. These 2 memorials were submitted by Danyang County and Hanyang County. They should have directly notified the Ministry of Justice when their local officials were assassinated. However, the Ministry of Justice had not dealt with these 2 cases after receiving the requests from the 2 counties. The officials of the 2 counties had no choice but to send the memorials directly to the Hall of Secretaries. Li Mu had originally planned to send these 2 memorials to the Hall of Secretaries and have them send it to the Ministry of Justice to urge them to implement it as soon as possible. However, if he followed this process of sending the memorials from the Hall of Secretaries to the Hall of Secretaries, then from the Hall of Secretaries to the Ministry of Justice, then from the Ministry of Justice to the Hall of Secretaries, then from the Hall of Secretaries to the Hall of Secretaries, this round trip would probably take half a year. The backlog of memorials had been dealt with. Li Mu left the Hall of Secretaries, walked out of the palace gates, and went to the Ministry of Justice's yamen. Greetings, Lord Li. Long time no see, Lord Li. Lord Li, come have a pear. After leaving Fairy's capital for 3 months, the people seemed to be more welcoming to him. Li Mu munched on a pear and leisurely went to the Ministry of Justice's yamen. The constable at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice was shocked when he saw Li Mu. Li Mu asked, "Is there an official in the Ministry of Justice in the yamen?" The bailiff replied, "The minister and the assistant minister are not here. The doctor is investigating the case." Li Mu stood outside the court and waited for the director of the Ministry of Justice to finish the case. He glanced at the courtroom and saw someone who surprised him. Li Mu looked back at the bailiff and asked, "Why is Wei Peng in the Ministry of Justice?" If he remembered correctly, Wei Peng should have failed the imperial examinations. At this moment, Li Mu saw him in the court of the Ministry of Justice. He seemed to be wearing official robes. Although the rank was very low, it was indeed official robes. The constable said, "Sir, are you talking about Manager Wei?" Manager Wei was specially recruited by Sir Lang Zhong 3 months ago, Li Mu said in surprise, specially recruited by the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu was the one who set up the imperial examination system, so he naturally knew what special recruitment was all about. When he set up the imperial examination system in order to recruit special talents, after the imperial examinations, other than the grand scholars on the honor roll of Azure Clouds, Each of the 6 ministries had a quota to specially recruit one person from the examinees who failed the role. After discussing with a few officials of the Secretariat, he made some restrictions on this quota. For example, even if it was a specially recruited person, they had to pass every subject of the imperial examination. Furthermore, they had to have outstanding results in one subject to meet the requirements of special recruitment. After the ministries proposed special recruitment, the Secretariat would discuss and make a decision before it was finally implemented. There was only one reason why Wei Peng could appear here. That was because of his outstanding results in criminal law. That was why the Ministry of Justice made an exception and specially recruited him outside of the 100 Grand Scholars. Li Mu looked at the court of the Ministry of Justice with interest. In the court, the director of the Ministry of Justice knocked on the gavel. He looked at the 2 people kneeling in front of the court and said, "Brother and Sister Jiang, do you admit to killing Su Shi?" The man kneeling in front of the court said, "Sir, please judge clearly. It was Su Shi who brought his servants and broke into my house in the middle of the night. He wanted to defile my sister. He had the servants control me, but I struggled to break free. I was anxious to save my sister, so I smashed his head with a jar." The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "But in the end, you and your sister are fine. Su Shi is dead, so you naturally have to take responsibility for his death." The man said with grief and indignation, "Am I supposed to just watch him defile my sister?" The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "You could have stopped him, but you killed him. Since it was an unintentional mistake and Su Shi was in the wrong first, I can give you a lighter sentence." The man lowered his head and said with a miserable voice, "He broke into my house time and time again wanting to do something to my sister. I went to the Yamen 3 times, but you didn't do anything. I just wanted to protect my sister. What crime is there? Where is the justice?" The director of the Ministry of Justice rubbed his forehead and said, "I said before that Su Shi did not harm you, but you killed him. This is excessive self-defense. I will now follow the law. Sir, please wait." The director of the Ministry of Justice was about to pass judgment when a voice suddenly came from the court. The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at the figure that walked out from the corner and immediately felt a headache coming on. Wei Peng had been in the Ministry of Justice for 3 months. He had opposed him in court for 3 months. As a result, he felt a headache coming on as soon as the court started. He wanted nothing more than to have the Yamen runners throw Wei Peng out. But he could not really do that because it was the assistant minister who had given him the privilege to have Wei Peng raise questions during the trial. He looked at Wei Peng and said through gritted teeth, "Manager Wei, what is it now?" Wei Peng walked into the court and raised his head to ask, "Sir, according to what you said, Su Shi did not harm the women of Xianxia. Xianxia's self-defense was excessive. Then how should he defend himself? Could it be that he has to wait until Su Shi harmed the women of Xianxia before he can defend himself?" The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "Of course, that is not what I meant." Wei Peng continued, "According to what you said, if Su Shi harmed the women of Xianxia, they planned to leave the Jiang family and did not continue to harm them. At this time, if Xianxia counterattacked, would that not be taking the initiative to attack?" The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "Of course, according to the law." Wei Peng looked at the director of the Ministry of Justice and asked, "Sir, you are familiar with the law. Then please tell me when can Xianxia counterattack?" The director of the Ministry of Justice rubbed his forehead. "This," Wei Peng said in a heavy voice, "Sir, if Xianxia was attacked by a group of villains in the middle of the night and wanted to defile your wife, what would you do? Could it be that you still have to consider when you should defend yourself? Is it after they defile your wife or after they draw a sword and slash you?" The director of the Ministry of Justice was speechless. Wei Peng did not wait for him to speak and continued, "The law is used to protect innocent people, not villains. This official believes that the Zhang siblings are not guilty. Su Shi entered their home in the middle of the night and plotted against them. She deserved to die. The Su family should compensate the Zhang siblings for this case." The director of the Ministry of Justice thought carefully and seemed to have been convinced by Wei Peng. He sighed and slammed the gavel. "This official now pronounces that Su Shi trespassed and committed murder. She deserved to die. The Zhang siblings are not guilty. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for upholding justice for us." The Zhang siblings were moved to tears. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Wei Peng. Wei Peng tidied his collar and straightened his official hat. "No need to thank me. This is what I should do." Chapter 347. Li Mu looked at the fulu on the table thoughtfully. The Tao of talismans in this era originated from the ancient times, and it was passed down from the talisman sect's Tao page. Most of the later generations only inherited and used it, and only the geniuses in the talisman Tao of talismans of the talisman sect possessed the ability to innovate and create their own talismans. If this Fulu was really created by Zhou Zhong, then his talent in the Fulu was not inferior to that of talisman Daozi. He was even better than the peak chiefs of the Fulu school. Such a person would not be unknown in the cultivation world. However, Zhou Zhong's name was known by everyone only because he was a pawn of the old party, a lackey of the Shao royal family, and not because of his talent in the way of talismans. At a certain moment, there was a sound of gentle footsteps outside the assistant minister's office. Zhou Zhong walked into the assistant minister's office and looked at Li Mu. He asked, "When did you come back to Luoyang?" Li Mu said, "Not long ago." Zhou Zhong walked to the table and sat down. He asked, "You never come here without a reason. What's the matter this time?" Li Mu asked, "Assistant Minister Zhou, do you know about the assassination of Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Deputy?" Zhou Zhong thought for a while and nodded. He said, "I remember that there were 2 cases." Li Mu continued to ask, "Why did the Ministry of Justice repeatedly slack in investigating the case when 2 court officials were assassinated? If it weren't for the fact that Danyang and Hanyang counties failed to report the case several times and directly bypassed the Ministry of Justice and sent the memorial to the Secretariat this time, I don't know how long these 2 cases would be delayed." Zhou Zhong took a sip of tea and explained, "You know that a few months ago the Ministry of Justice was busy because of the students of the academy and the case of Chui Ming. They could not even take care of the case in Luoyang County, let alone the distant Danyang County and Hanyang County. After that, they were delayed for a long time because of the imperial examination, so I forgot about these 2 cases. I only remembered them when you mentioned them today. I will immediately send someone to investigate this case." Li Mu's job was to supervise and remind the Ministry of Justice. Since Zhou Zhong had agreed, he had nothing else to say. The division of labor between the 3 provinces and 6 ministries was very clear. The Secretariat was responsible for formulating policies, but the specific implementation was decided by the 6 ministries. Li Mu walked out of the assistant minister's office and saw a figure standing outside the duty room opposite him. Wei Peng had once been the most typical hedonistic son of a wealthy family in the divine capital. However, today Li Mu had a whole new level of respect for him. The 2 of them looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although they were once enemies, the grudges of the past had long disappeared with time. Inside the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong looked at the director of the Ministry of Justice and said, "I'll leave the cases of Danyang County and Hanyang County to you." The director of the Ministry of Justice bowed and said, "Yes." The expression on his face was submissive, but he was complaining in his heart. In the beginning it was Assistant Minister Zhou who didn't let him handle these 2 cases. Now it was still Assistant Minister Zhou who let him handle them. When the cases had just happened, it was obviously when there were the most clues and the easiest time to investigate. Now that half a year had passed, the 2 people's graves were already covered in grass. How was he supposed to investigate? Wasn't it obvious that Zhou Zhong was pushing the blame of his own negligence to him? Although he complained, he still had to do the work that was supposed to be done. After all, he was just a lowly director. At the right time, he took the initiative to take the blame for his superior's mistakes. This was the self-cultivation of a subordinate. The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the assistant minister's office and saw a figure standing outside the duty room opposite. He suddenly had an idea and said, "Manager Wei, come here." Wei Peng walked over and asked, "What orders do you have for me, Lord Yang?" The director of the Ministry of Justice patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't you like to handle cases? I happen to have 2 important cases here for you to handle. I give you 3 months to investigate the assassination of Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Deputy. If you can't find out, I'll deduct 2 months of your salary." At the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong picked up a brush and wrote a few runes on a piece of paper. The runes were crooked and couldn't form Fulu at all. This was the result of not being able to calm his mind while writing the runes. Smack! He slammed the brush on the table and gripped the piece of paper in his hand. The veins on the back of his hand were bulging. After leaving the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu returned to the Li residence. The cracks on the Dao bell had almost been repaired. He was still searching for new spells that had never appeared in this world to help it become complete as soon as possible. Only a complete Dao bell could unleash its absolute defense. Even if there was a small crack, it would be a huge flaw in the eyes of a high-level cultivator. Li Mu only realized now that the group of old foxes had let him take away the Dao Bell so easily. As expected, it wasn't that simple. An incomplete Dao Bell wasn't very useful to the Fulu school. If it were to slowly repair itself, it would take at least 10 years or even decades. Li Mu thought that he had gained an advantage, but in reality he had lost out again, unless he could keep the Dao Bell by his side forever. Inside the Li residence, sometimes it rained, sometimes it snowed, and sometimes it thundered. However, because of the array's obstruction, the fluctuations of spiritual qi and magic power didn't spread outside the residence. The Dao Bell was extremely excited. It grew to about 3 feet tall and completely enveloped Li Mu. The golden spots of light at the crack were repairing the cracks on the Dao Bell bit by bit. After a while, Li Mu stopped the spell. The Dao Bell turned back to the size of a palm and floated on his shoulder. The Empress walked out of the void and looked at the Dao Bell that was happily revolving around Li Mu. She asked, "Can I take a look at it?" Apart from Li Mu, the Dao Bell was more resistant to everyone. It swayed left and right and buzzed a few times to express its resistance and unwillingness. Li Mu smacked the top of its head and said, "Go." The Dao Bell buzzed a few more times before reluctantly flying toward the Empress. Zhou stretched out her hand. The Dao Bell floated above her hand and didn't fall down. Zhou looked at it for a while and then withdrew her hand. The Dao Bell flew back to Li Mu's side. She looked at the Dao Bell and said, "This bell should be a treasure from the ancient era. No wonder it has such power." The ancient era usually referred to the era 10,000 years ago. The Tao of cultivation had developed rapidly in the past 1,000 years. 1,000 years ago, the Tao of cultivation had experienced a barbaric period that lasted for thousands of years. Its development was extremely slow, and had only reached a peak in the past 1,000 years. However, countless cultivators discovered through research that in the ancient times 10,000 years ago, there was another peak in the path of cultivation. That was a golden age that was even more prosperous than the current cultivation world. There was enough evidence to prove that whether it was the Tao scripture, the Tao bell, or the treasures of the other sects, they were all products of the previous era. The Tao techniques of that era were even more powerful. Fulu, pills, formations, weapon forging, and martial arts were also more mature. Today's cultivators could establish their own sects just by learning the basics. That was an era that the current cultivators envied and yearned for the most. Li Mu looked at the Tao bell in front of him. In this era, it could become the treasure of the Fulu school. However, in the ancient era, it might just be an ordinary treasure. As Li Mu sighed, the door of the Li residence was suddenly pushed open. A figure walked in from outside. Lu Hanyan looked around and asked, "Is this our new home?" Wan flew over from the corner and hugged her arm. She said happily, "Young mistress." Li Mu's figure flashed and appeared beside Lu Hanyan. He asked in surprise, "Why are you in the divine capital? Are you still going back to Baiyin Mountain?" Lu Hanyan smiled at him and said, "I'm not going back." Then she saw another figure standing in the courtyard. She asked, "She is?" Li Mu said, "This is Her Majesty the Empress." Then she introduced her to the Empress. "Your Majesty, this is my fiancé." Lu Hanyan had lived in the divine capital since she was young. She knew the meaning of the Empress better than Xiaobai. She quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." The Empress looked at them and said, "I still have some memorials to deal with in the palace. I won't disturb you." After she finished speaking, her figure gradually faded away in front of the two of them. Lu Hanyan had heard about Big Sister Zhou from Xiaobai a long time ago. She asked Li Mu, "Has Her Majesty been coming to our house often recently?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Quite often. She treats Xiaobai as her younger sister and often comes to visit her." Lu Hanyan only asked one question. Then she stopped thinking about the Empress. After 2 years she returned to the divine capital. It seemed that nothing had changed, but in fact, everything had changed. Li Mu took her around the house. Lu Hanyan said, "This house is so big. It's spacious enough for 12 people. It's just the 4 of us. Isn't it a waste?" Li Mu said, "There are 4 of us now. In the future there might be 5, 6, 7 or 8. It won't be a waste then?" Lu Hanyan looked up and asked, "What do you mean?" Li Mu said, "What I mean is, should we hire a few maids and servants? Also, the house is bigger. When relatives and friends come in the future, we should have rooms to entertain them." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "That's true. But we don't need maids and servants. I don't like outsiders in the house. We can live with ourselves." Li Mu took her hand and said, "I'll listen to you." Lu Hanyan held him and said, "Come with me to the wonderful sound bar first. I want to see Xiaoqi and the others." Chang'e Palace. Mr. Mei and Shangguanli were sorting the memorials from the various departments. There was a fluctuation in the space in the hall. The Empress appeared out of thin air. She looked at the two and said, "You two can leave first." Mr. Mei and Shangguanli walked out of the hall. He was puzzled and asked, "Why did your Majesty come back so early today?" Shangguanli shook her head and said, "I don't know." Mr. Mei thought for a moment and said, "You stay in the palace. I'll go to the Li mansion to take a look." In the Chang'e Palace, Zhou Yi calmly opened a memorial. Her eyes were slightly unfocused. She didn't know why, but there was an inexplicable ripple in her calm heart. This was the sign of the inner demon. This time she used her spiritual power, but she couldn't erase this ripple no matter how hard she tried. She didn't calm down until she silently recited the mind-clearing spell. She looked troubled and murmured, "What's wrong with me?" Chapter 348. Li Mu guessed that Lu Hanyan came out of seclusion early and came to Xianxia without saying anything. She must have had the intention of checking up on him. Fortunately, Li Mu had kept himself clean for half a year in Xianxia. He was strict with himself and never flirted with women. Many people wanted to introduce their daughters to him, but he rejected them all. When she went out to ask around, all she heard was Li Mu's good points. As for seeing the Empress at home when she opened the door, Li Mu didn't even need to explain. The Empress was like a god in their hearts. She wouldn't think too much about it. Even if they were in the room or on the bed, as long as they were both wearing clothes, Lu Hanyan probably wouldn't think too much about it, let alone him and the Empress in the courtyard. After being separated from her sisters at Great Music Bar for 2 years, Lu Hanyan went to Great Music Bar on the first day she returned to Xianxia. She met up with Yinin, Miao Miao, 16, 7 and other good friends. Li Mu invited them to a banquet at the fragrance bar to thank them for taking care of Lu Hanyan in the past. 16 sat beside Lu Hanyan and hugged her arm. She rested her head on Lu Hanyan's shoulder and said, "I thought I wouldn't see you again in this lifetime." Her other arm was hugged by 7. 7 looked at her and complained, "Sister Hanyan, you're so cruel. Last time you snuck away, I cried for a long time." Most of the girls at Great Music Bar were sold by their families when they were young. They grew up together and were close to each other even though they weren't family. After a while the atmosphere started to liven up. The girls started to gossip about her and Li Mu after asking her about her experiences in the past 2 years. "Sister Hanyan, how did you and brother-in-law meet? How did you end up together? When do you plan to get married? When you get married, I'll help you with the arrangements." They had already asked Li Mu about these things once and it was still the same gossip. But gossip was gossip, and what they said was what Li Mu needed to consider at the moment. When Lu Hanyan decided to go to Mount Baiyun, Li Mu told her that the day she came to Xianxia was the day he would marry her. Li Mu had already calculated the date, but Lu Hanyan's return to Fairy's capital was a few months earlier than what they had agreed on. The date that Li Mu calculated was a little too late. He recalculated according to their birth characters. The closest auspicious day was the 9th of the next month, which was exactly 1 month away from today. Lu Hanyan's parents were long gone, and Li Mu had always been alone. After some discussion they decided to keep things simple. They would just invite some friends from Fairy's capital to their house for a meal and drink the wedding wine. Lu Hanyan was supposed to sleep with Li Mu, but before the wedding she became coy and insisted on sleeping in a different room from Li Mu, saying that she wanted to maintain the modesty of an unmarried woman. Women just like to pretend to be reserved. She had slept with him countless times in the past, and now she was lying to herself. However, Li Mu didn't have any objections. After all, they could sleep together every day in the future, and he wasn't in a hurry for half a month. After waiting for so long, this day finally came. A month later he was also a man with a family. After being in Fairy's capital for half a year, Li Mu didn't make many friends, but made many enemies. After careful calculation, he realized that he didn't need to invite many people on the wedding day. The Fulu school had to inform them. Xianxia was equivalent to Li Mu's half-mother-in-law. She had to come when her disciple got married. As for the peak masters, it wasn't certain. They had already been exploited by Lu Hanyan and Li Mu in turns. If they came this time, they might even take out the last of their family's assets. As for the White Demon King and Xuandu, although Li Mu wanted to inform them, his 2 elder brothers' whereabouts were elusive. Li Mu couldn't inform them even if he wanted to. Lu Hanyan's relatives and friends in Fairy's capital were her sisters at the wonderful music bar. Li Mu didn't know many people, so a few invitations were enough. The first person Li Mu thought of was naturally the Empress. However, as the ruler of a country, it was somewhat inappropriate for her to attend the wedding of her subjects. Even if she was willing, her subjects wouldn't be willing. Therefore, when he entered the palace, he only brought 2 invitations. At the entrance of Jianghu Palace, Li Mu handed one invitation to Mr. Mei and the other to Shangguanli. He said, "My wedding is on the 9th of next month. Come to my wedding banquet if you have time." "Congratulations." Sir Mei took the invitation card with a complicated look in his eyes. If she was a few years older, she would be Li Mu's mother. Now that Li Mu was about to get married, she was still alone. Shangguanli also reached out to take the invitation without saying anything, which was her usual style. Li Mu gave Mr. Mei another invitation and said, "Sister Mei, help me give one to Mrs. Chu. By the way, is Her Majesty inside?" Lord Mei glanced at him and asked, "You still want to invite His Majesty? What are you thinking? If His Majesty appears at your wedding banquet, the spittle of the courtiers during the morning court session would be enough to drown you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Even if I can't invite Her Majesty, I still have to tell her." Mr. Mei waved his hand and said, "Go, go." Seeing Li Mu walk into Jianghu Palace, she glanced in the direction of the palace and sighed in melancholy. Li Mu walked into Jianghu Palace and saw the Empress sitting behind a table in front. She was probably reading memorials. Li Mu stood in the middle of the palace and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty." The Empress put down the memorials and looked up at him. She asked, "What is it?" Li Mu said, "My wedding will be on the 9th of next month. I wonder if Your Majesty would like to attend the wedding banquet." The Empress said in a low voice, "With my status, attending the wedding banquet will cause a lot of criticism. At that time I'll ask Mei Wei to send a generous gift." Li Mu thought that if the Empress was willing to come, he could change her appearance. Since she said so, Li Mu didn't insist. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll leave now." Li Mu left the palace. The Empress picked up another memorial and put it down after a while. She said in a low voice, "Mei Wei, come in." Mr. Mei walked in and asked, "Your Majesty, what are your orders?" The Empress thought for a while and asked, "Li Mu's wedding is a joyous occasion for him. Why don't I feel happy at all?" Mr. Mei looked up at her. "You wanted to say something but didn't?" The Empress said, "Say whatever you think. Even if you say something wrong, I won't blame you." Mr. Mei shook his head helplessly and said, "I think Your Majesty is too possessive of Li Mu." The Empress looked at him and asked, "What is possessiveness?" Mr. Mei said, "You only allow yourself to touch the things you like. Even if others get close to them, you won't be happy. This is a manifestation of possessiveness." The Empress thought for a while and seemed to realize something. She asked, "But why would I be possessive of him?" Mr. Mei said, "This is normal. Li Mu is young and promising. He can solve a lot of problems for Your Majesty. Your Majesty trusts him and loves him. You hope that he will be loyal to you forever. When he gets closer to others than you, Your Majesty will be unhappy. This is human nature," she then added. "If a woman likes a man, it's very easy for her to feel possessive towards him. She wouldn't want that man to have any contact with other women. This is a kind of possessiveness. Similarly, if two people are very good friends, when one of them finds out that the other has a new friend who's even closer to him, he'll feel uncomfortable. This is also a kind of possessiveness. Li Mu is His Majesty's right-hand man. It's not strange for His Majesty to feel possessive towards him." The Empress thought for a while and asked, "Are you saying that I shouldn't feel uncomfortable when Li Mu gets married?" Mr. Mei thought for a while and said, "I hope Your Majesty understands that even if Li Mu gets married, it won't affect your relationship with him. He will still be loyal to you. Other than being your official, he has his own life. Your Majesty shouldn't feel uncomfortable because of this?" The Empress was silent for a while and said, "You are right. He is loyal to me. I should treat his wife the same way I treat him." Ask the Secretariat to write an edict and give her a 5th-rank title. Also, give her a golden hairpin and a pair of jade bracelets. Mr. Mei saw that she had thought it through. He smiled and asked, "Your Majesty, do you feel better now?" Zhou Yi frowned. She didn't feel better. Instead, she felt even worse. She thought for a while and said, "Forget it. He is the one who is loyal to me, not his wife. Don't ask the Secretariat to write an edict." Mr. Mei paused and asked tentatively, "Then the golden hairpin and jade bracelets?" Zhou Yi thought for a while and said, "I won't give them to you either." Chapter 349. Li Mu walked out of Jianghu Palace with a puzzled look on his face. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the Empress wasn't happy about the news of his upcoming marriage. That didn't make sense. He was loyal to the Empress. Shouldn't the Empress be happy for him now that he had successfully resolved his marriage? Unless the Empress had a change of heart. But that didn't seem possible. They were still in love a few days ago. There was no reason for her to suddenly change her mind. Li Mu thought about it carefully and realized that he had been too careless this time. When it came to marriage, other people might think of it as happiness and bliss. However, the Empress' marriage was not blissful. She was used as a political bargaining chip by the Zhou clan and married to the former crown prince. They were only husband and wife in name but not in reality. She had a failed marriage. Wasn't Li Mu stabbing her in the heart by mentioning marriage in front of her? He hadn't thought about this matter. He should have thought about taking the Empress' feelings into consideration. He sighed. It was too late for regrets now. He had to be more careful in front of the Empress in the future. She was powerful, but her heart was fragile and sensitive. She was very similar to Lu Hanyan in this aspect. Even their experiences had something in common. They were both betrayed by their families. For someone who had experienced this, no matter how high their position was or how powerful they were, there would always be a sensitive and forbidden area in their hearts. Fortunately, Lu Hanyan had met him. Li Mu would use the rest of his life to heal the wounds she had suffered when she was young. The Empress, on the other hand, was not so lucky. No matter how powerful she was, no matter how high her status was, and no matter how powerful she was, she would never be able to obtain a man like him. Li Mu didn't stop when he passed by the secretary's department. He walked past it directly. Li Mu was now a member of the secretary's department and had many colleagues here. However, Li Mu only had a nodding acquaintance with some of them. Some of them seemed to be friendly on the surface, but they were actually mortal enemies. Li Mu hoped to see friends he truly recognized at his wedding. He would invite the constables of the ferries department, not the officials of the secretary's department. The ferries department. When the constables heard the news, they all congratulated him. Congratulations, boss. No wonder the boss doesn't care about the women in Fairy's capital. It turns out that she's already taken. If this news gets out, who knows how many women in the Fairy's capital will cry? Inside the yamen, Li Si cupped his hands to Li Mu and said, "Congratulations." Li Mu asked, "What about you? When do you plan to get married?" Li Si said, "I'll wait for Miao Miao to go down the mountain. In a few days I'll be returning to the North County. Do you want to pick up Xianxia?" Li Mu nodded and said, "When you come back, take him with you." It had been a long time since the three heroes of the Yangqiu County government gathered together. After that farewell, the three of them were no longer the same. Xianxia was different from Li Mu and Li Si. He wasn't interested in cultivation. Nothing was more attractive to him than making money. Li Si put his hand on Li Mu's shoulder and said, "Since you've decided to get married, you'll have to settle down." Li Mu was stunned. "When have I not settled down?" All the people in Fairy's capital knew that his primordial yang was still there. He had kept his chastity for Lu Hanyan. Was this not settling down? Li Si shook his head and didn't say anything else. After leaving the Fairy's department, Li Mu returned to the North Court. He didn't go back to the Li Mansion but to the Zhang Mansion first. Before he left Fairy's capital last time, the Empress had rewarded Zhang Chun with a house with 3 courtyards. Although it was still a distance away from his dream of a house with 5 courtyards, it was still the envy of countless officials in the court to own a house with 3 courtyards in a place like the North Court where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Li Mu knocked on the door. Soon, footsteps came from inside. Zhang Chun opened the door and said, "Li Mu, when did you come back to Fairy's capital?" "Come in and have a seat," Li Mu said. "I just came back." "I won't be coming in. I'm here to deliver something to you." Li Mu took out an invitation and handed it to him. He said, "I'm getting married next month. Remember to bring Madame Zhang and Miss Yi to the wedding banquet." Zhang Chun was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He said in shock, "Wedding?" Li Mu was also stunned. He asked, "Is there a problem?" Zhang Chun said in disbelief, "Will the Zhou family agree? Will the Xiao family agree? Even if they agree, all the officials in the court won't agree." Li Mu looked at him strangely. He was marrying Lu Hanyan, not the Empress. Why did the Zhou family and the Xiao family agree? What right did all the officials have to object? Zhang Chun flipped open the invitation and was stunned for a long time before he came back to his senses and said, "So it's with Miss Lu?" Li Mu said, "Who else can it be?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said in disappointment, "No, no one." Li Mu frowned and asked, "Old Zhang, you don't seem too happy about my marriage?" "No, of course not." Zhang Chun showed a smile that was uglier than crying. He said, "Congratulations, congratulations. I wish you and Lady Lu grow old together and have a child soon." After a while, Zhang Chun saw Li Mu off and closed the door. He leaned against the door and sighed. Madame Zhang walked out of the room and asked worriedly, "What happened? Why do you look like that?" Zhang Chun sighed again and said, "Madam, I'm afraid there's no hope for our five-zoned house." Li Mu returned home and found that Lu Hanyin had already finished cooking and was waiting for him in the yard. Usually he was the one who cooked at home. When the Empress came, the situation suddenly changed. He was not used to it. Lu Hanyin made all the dishes that Li Mu liked. She said with a satisfied smile, "Today I went shopping with Xiao Bai and Wan Wan and heard the people talking about you. The people of Xindu were his solid support." Li Mu asked calmly, "What did they say about me?" Lu Hanyin said, "They said that you are righteous, not afraid of power, and that you are a good official." Li Mu asked, "What else did they say?" Lu Hanyin said with satisfaction, "They also said that you are clean and do not get close to women." Li Mu looked at her and said, "Do you believe me now? Even if you don't believe in Xiao Bai, don't you believe in all the people of Xindu?" "I believe you, I believe you." Lu Hanyin picked up a piece of tofu and put it in front of his mouth. She said, "Open your mouth, this is your reward." Li Mu was very busy these days. There was only a month before the wedding, but there were many things that needed to be prepared in advance. There were many details involved. Especially for people like him and Lu Hanyin who had never been married before, they did not know how to do it. Among the people he knew, only Zhang Chun and the Empress had experience. He definitely could not ask the Empress. Firstly, she definitely did not need to prepare for her wedding. Secondly, he had already stabbed the Empress in the chest a few days ago. If he asked her now, wouldn't it be the same as rubbing salt on her wound? As for Zhang Chun, he seemed to have encountered something recently and was in low spirits. Li Mu did not bother him anymore. Fortunately, with the help of Wan Wan and Xiao Bai, although the preparation was slow, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. In the Li residence, Li Mu was busy and happy. In the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng scratched his head in frustration and pulled out a handful of hair. The assassination of the officials in Ani County and Tianhe County really made his head ache. He was familiar with the law and good at judging cases, but not good at investigating cases. Wei Peng felt that the imperial court should separate judging and investigating cases because they were not the same thing. Judging a case tested the officials' foundation in the law, as well as their understanding and application of the law. As for investigating a case, it tested the official's insight, logical reasoning, and thinking ability. He was good at judging cases but not at investigating. Wasn't it deliberately making things difficult for him to find the murderers based on just 2 case files? The deaths of these 2 officials could be due to personal grudges, or because they were heartless officials and aroused the resentment of the people. They were killed by cultivators who could not bear to see them get rid of evil for the people. This kind of thing happened in every dynasty. Wei Peng flipped through the resumes of the 2 officials that he had copied from the Ministry of Personnel. He planned to start with the latter possibility. However, the resumes of the 2 officials were very clean. Their ratings over the years were above A, and they did not seem like corrupt officials who took advantage of the people. However, he also knew that the ratings of the Ministry of Personnel's resumes were no better than a piece of scrap paper. If he really wanted to know how these 2 officials were like, he would probably have to go to Hanyang County and Danyang County to investigate personally. Wei Peng rubbed his forehead and leaned back in his chair. He was even more frustrated. These 2 cases had happened a long time ago. Even if he went to these 2 counties, he would not be able to find anything useful. His eyes inadvertently swept across the resumes of the 2 officials who were killed, and his gaze suddenly froze. He sat up again and took the resumes. After looking through them carefully, he finally found some clues. The deaths of the magistrate of Ani County and the deputy of Tianhe County were 2 unrelated cases, but they were related. For example, the 2 of them were once in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. Not only that, they were officials in the Ministry of Personnel at the same time and were promoted in the same year. One was promoted to the magistrate of Ani County, and the other to the deputy of Tianhe County. It was definitely an exceptional promotion from grade 9 to grade 7. They were officials in the Ministry of Personnel at the same time, were promoted in an exceptional way, and were almost assassinated at the same time. Wei Peng stood up suddenly and muttered, "This is definitely not a coincidence." Chapter 350. At the Ministry of Personnel. An official walked out of the watchroom and looked at the person standing in the courtyard. He asked, "Manager Wei, what brings you to the Ministry of Personnel today?" Wei Peng went straight to the point. There are 2 cases in the Ministry of Justice and I need to investigate the details of 2 officials. May I trouble you to help me check their files? The official asked, which county are they from? Please have a seat, Manager Wei. I'll arrange for someone to help you. Wei Peng passed him a piece of paper and said, Danyang County's Ani County Magistrate Ding Yun. Hanyang County's Qianhe County's Minister Ho Bai. The manager of the Ministry of Personnel arranged for his subordinate to check the files of the people Wei Peng wanted. He sat in the watchroom and started chatting with Wei Peng. The Wei family used to belong to the old party. However, Wei Peng's father was demoted because he was involved in the case of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights framing Li Mu. He was never hired again. Wei Peng thought that the Wei family would disappear from Luoyang. He did not expect that after the imperial examinations, Wei Peng would be specially recruited by the Ministry of Justice. Although his rank was not high and he was a manager like him, it was said that Assistant Minister Zhou appreciated him. His future was naturally brighter than his. Wei Peng was preoccupied with the case and was not in the mood to chat with the manager of the Ministry of Personnel. Fortunately, the subordinate soon brought over the files of the 2 officials. The files used by the Ministry of Justice could be copied. However, a lot of the content would be omitted when they were taken back. Wei Peng decided to just read them in the Ministry of Personnel. The files in the Ministry of Personnel were obviously much more detailed. Not only did it record their birthplace, family and other information, but it also recorded every assessment, promotion and transfer after they became officials in detail. After looking through it carefully, Wei Peng found more suspicious points. There were many similarities between the 2. They were both students of Baichuan Academy and left the academy in the same year to become officials. They were both managers of the Ministry of Personnel. They were promoted at the same time and were assassinated at the same time. Even the way they died was very similar. It was difficult to explain this with the word coincidence. After returning to the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng told Zhou Zhong about his findings. Zhou Zhong's index finger gently tapped on the table as he asked, So, you suspect that these 2 cases were done by the same person, and that the mastermind has a grudge with these 2 people? Wei Peng nodded and said, It's impossible for 2 cases to have so many coincidences. The possibility of a vendetta is very high, but without more clues, finding the murderer is like finding a needle in a haystack. Zhou Zhong said, The Ministry of Justice is only in charge of investigating the case. Pursuing the culprit is the imperial court's business. The Ministry of Justice has already investigated up to this point. Let's leave the rest to the imperial court. Wei Peng bowed. Yes. Wei Peng actually wanted to investigate further, but since the assistant minister had spoken, he didn't insist. It was better to hand over the case as soon as possible, lest he lose all his hair at such a young age. After Wei Peng left, Zhou Zhong stood up several times before slowly sitting down again. He seemed a little anxious. In the Hall of Governmental Affairs, Li Mu unhurriedly took out the new report from the Ministry of Justice. These yamen still needed to be beaten up from time to time so that they would know how to do things properly. After he had urged the Ministry of Justice the last time, the Ministry of Justice had given a reply regarding the assassination of the 2 officials in just a few days. Li Mu hadn't thought that these 2 unrelated cases would have such a connection. In this way, when the imperial court sent people to pursue the culprit, they would have a clear direction. The matter of pursuing the culprit was the responsibility of the Ministry of Worship. The Ministry of Worship was an organization independent of the imperial court. There were experts recruited by the imperial court from all over the world, and they specialized in dealing with important cases that the local government couldn't handle. After the incident in Yang County, the people who went to capture Xiaoyu were the Ministry of Worship. Li Mu handed the report from the Ministry of Justice to the Hall of Governmental Affairs Assistant Minister Lu Yi. Lu Yi quickly gave an order for someone to send it to the Ministry of Worship. At this point, Li Mu had fulfilled his duty. He returned to his own yamen. Not long after sitting down, he felt a familiar aura coming from outside the Hall of Governmental Affairs. He walked out of the Hall of Governmental Affairs yamen and saw Mr. Mei standing at the door. He asked, Sister Mei, what's the matter? Mr. Mei glanced at him and said, Nothing. I just haven't seen you in a few days, so I came to see you. Li Mu scratched his head. How many days has it been? Mr. Mei said, You really do have a wife. You forgot about His Majesty. You haven't been to Jianghu Palace for 5 days. Li Mu corrected her. What do you mean I forgot about His Majesty because I have a wife? I'm just worried about irritating His Majesty. Mr. Mei asked, Why would you irritate His Majesty? Li Mu said in a low voice, "You also know that His Majesty's marriage is not that happy. My wife is so beautiful and her marriage is so happy. If she appeared in front of His Majesty every day, His Majesty might feel bad." Mr. May hit him on the head angrily and said, "If His Majesty hears this, be careful of your but." Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Didn't you say that His Majesty's heart is broader than the sea?" Mr. May's eyes wandered and said, "Even if His Majesty is broad-minded, it is not a reason for you to talk about His Majesty behind his back." What nonsense was this? The Empress' marriage was not happy to begin with. Li Mu was just stating the truth. He was taking care of the Empress' emotions. As long as the Empress was reasonable, she would not blame him. Among all the women that Li Mu was familiar with, there was no one who was more reasonable than the Empress. Merely the fact that she had taken the initiative to admit her mistakes and change after realizing her mistakes had already defeated the majority of women. Not only that, ever since Lu Hanyan came to Chengdu, she never entered Li Mu's dream again, nor did she come to the Li mansion. It seemed that even the Empress knew that she should not disturb the couple's private time. Mr. May shook his head and looked at Li Mu. He said, "Regardless of whether His Majesty is broad-minded or not, you can't neglect His Majesty just because you have a wife. Did you forget how you felt when His Majesty neglected you last time?" Li Mu thought about it carefully. After Lu Hanyan came back to Chengdu, he did seem to neglect the Empress. The Empress's heart was not as broad as it seemed. Maybe she was already holding a grudge against Li Mu. When they passed by the market, Li Mu bought a crucian carp and a piece of tofu. He was going to make crucian carp and tofu soup the next morning. When they got home, Lu Hanyan looked at the fish in his hand and said in surprise, "We already have one fish at home. Why did you buy another one?" Li Mu said, "I'm saving this one to make soup for tomorrow. I'll give it to His Majesty during the morning court." Lu Hanyan asked in confusion, "Why are you making soup for His Majesty?" Li Mu put the fresh fish in a small water tank and explained, "It's a long story. The real His Majesty is not like what you see." Li Mu told Lu Hanyan about the Empress. After hearing the story, Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's arm and said in shock and sympathy, "If that's the case, His Majesty is too pitiful." Lu Hanyan and the Empress had similar experiences, but they were also different. She was abandoned by her parents because of her purine body. She had not seen her family since she was a child. The Empress was used by her family more than once. Even now, the Zhou family was still using her to achieve their goal of stealing the country. The similar experiences made Lu Hanyan feel pity for her. In her opinion, the Empress was more pitiful than herself. Li Mu continued, "When you were not in Luoyang, His Majesty treated me very well. If it were not for His Majesty's protection, I would not have been able to deal with the old and new parties, as well as the academy. The house we are living in now is a gift from His Majesty. His Majesty often teaches me cultivation and has rewarded me with many things. Therefore, I want to do more for His Majesty." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "That's what I should do. Sleep a little more tomorrow morning. I'll make the soup for His Majesty." Li Mu said, "Let's do it together." The two of them had to wake up together tomorrow morning, so it was natural for them to sleep together at night. Lu Hanyan seemed to have forgotten what she had said a few days ago. At night, she climbed into Li Mu's bed again. In her sleep, she still held his hand tightly. Li Mu kissed her gently on the forehead and closed his eyes. Late at night, the space in the courtyard fluctuated and a figure slowly appeared. She took a step forward and suddenly stopped. She did not enter the room as usual. The space in the courtyard fluctuated again and the figure slowly faded away. In the room, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan were sleeping in each other's arms. Thousands of miles away, in Baiyu County of Yushan Commandery, the county magistrate of Baiyu County suddenly woke up from his sleep. He looked at the figure in his room and said in shock, "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the county office? Leave immediately." What answered him was an incomparably sharp sword light. Under the sword, the county magistrate of Baiyu County was beheaded. A shadow flew out from his corpse. His primordial spirit looked at the figure in the room in horror and said in a shrill voice, "I am an official of the imperial court. If you dare to kill me, the imperial court will not let you go. No matter where you run to, you can't escape death." Boom. Before he could finish his sentence, a purple thunderbolt suddenly exploded in the room. The county magistrate's primordial spirit was struck by the thunderbolt and completely disappeared. A moment later, several constables rushed into the room. Soon voices came from the room. Someone come quickly. Sir, there was an assassination attempt." Chapter 351. Jade Mountain County. The news of the Bayou County magistrate being assassinated shook the entire Jade Mountain County. How many years had it been since such a vile thing as murdering an official of the imperial court had happened in Yushan County? The last time they heard of such a thing was in North County, Yang County. They didn't expect Jade Mountain County to encounter it so soon. The county magistrate was furious and ordered all the constables to search every village and city in the county to find the culprit. Even if they only provided clues, they would be rewarded handsomely. Jade Mountain County, Zhongshan County. The assassination of the Bayou County magistrate had affected the entire Jade Mountain County. Zhongshan County was no exception. The county Yaman's constables and Min Zhuang had already checked the villages one by one, looking for suspicious people. Within the county, all the inns, brothels and places that might be hiding people were searched 5 or 6 times in a day. The Zhongshan County magistrate hid in the county office and didn't come out. He wasn't stingy with spiritual jades and activated the formation outside the county office to its strongest state. He also carried the protective treasure given by the imperial court with him to deal with any unexpected situations. The county magistrate of Bayou County was inexplicably infiltrated by someone and destroyed in body and soul. That thief could be an assassin from the Devil's Doctrine or a cultivator who hated the imperial court. If he could kill the county magistrate of Bayou County, he could also kill the county magistrate of Zhongshan County. The Zhongshan County magistrate sat in the office and looked at a middle-aged man. He said, "Magistrate Huang, I suggest you stay in the county office. It's obviously not peaceful recently. I heard that Hanyang County and Danyang County officials were also killed. It'll be safer if everyone stays together." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "I'm just a magistrate. Even if it's a culprit, I won't care. It's fine." With that, he slowly walked out of the county office. The Zhongshan County magistrate looked at his back with dissatisfaction. Of course, he didn't keep Magistrate Huang in the county office for his safety. It was only because Magistrate Huang had level 4 supernatural power that he could feel more at ease with such an expert in the county office. Magistrate Huang walked out of the county office and passed through 2 streets before arriving in front of a house. As a magistrate, he didn't choose to live in the county office. Instead, he rented a small courtyard in a remote area of the county. He rented it for 14 years. He opened the courtyard door and entered. He saw a figure standing in the courtyard. The figure was tall and slender, and from the silhouette, it should be a woman. The woman stood with her back facing the door. She wore a conical bamboo hat on her head. A black veil hung from the edge of the hat, covering her face. County Magistrate Huang looked at the figure and paused for a moment. The next moment he walked into the yard and closed the door. He looked up at the woman's back and shook his head. "I've waited here for 14 years?" The woman turned around and looked at him through the black veil on his bamboo hat. There was a trace of melancholy on County Magistrate Huang's face as he muttered to himself, "For the past 14 years, I haven't had a good night's sleep. I knew that you would find me in the end. I wanted you to come, but at the same time I didn't want you to come. Why?" The woman's voice was cold, as if it didn't contain any human emotions. County Magistrate Huang said slowly, "The past 14 years have been too painful for me. I hope that you can set me free. However, I also know that if you come to find me, it means that you've already embarked on this path. This is a path of no return. The moment you set foot on it, there's no turning back." He looked at the woman and said, "Those who have passed away forever. Those who are still alive must live on even more." The woman said faintly, "Some people don't deserve to live." County Magistrate Huang was silent for a moment before he nodded and said, "Some people don't deserve to live, but can you let my family go? That matter has nothing to do with them." The woman was silent for a moment before she said calmly, "All right. Thank you." County Magistrate Huang heaved a sigh of relief and said, 14 years ago, I sent them back to their hometown. I've waited here alone for you for 14 years. You've finally come." His voice was calm and there was a trace of relief in it. The woman looked at him and asked, "Why?" County Magistrate Huang knew what she was asking. He shook his head and said, "It's meaningless to talk about this now. Everyone has to be responsible for their mistakes. I'm indebted to you, sir. I've let you down." He faced the woman and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of relief in his voice as he said softly, "I'm sorry." After he finished speaking, his head slowly drooped. At this moment, this 4th realm cultivator's 3 souls and 7 spirits dissipated. A day later. In the courtyard. County Magistrate Yu Shan stood in front of County Magistrate Huang's kneeling corpse. His expression was extremely gloomy. He gritted his teeth and said, "Arrogant, too arrogant. If I don't catch you, I'm not human." The Zhongshan County Magistrate lamented, "Sir Huang, oh Sir Huang. I've advised you to stay in the county office with me. Why didn't you listen? Great, now you've been killed by a criminal." County Magistrate Yushan looked at County Magistrate Huang's corpse with a trace of doubt on his face. He frowned and said, "County Magistrate Huang's death doesn't seem like a homicide. It seems like his soul dissipated on its own." County Magistrate Yushan asked, "What reason does he have to do this?" County Magistrate Yushan shook his head and said, "I don't know. First he killed someone, then he disguised it as a suicide. Did he think he could fool me with such a clumsy method?" Within a few days, 2 officials under his jurisdiction had died. County Magistrate Yushan's mana was surging. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. He said gloomily, "You stay in County Magistrate Yushan and continue to track down the murderer. I'm going to Fairy's capital. I must make the Imperial Court investigate this matter thoroughly and give the people of my county an explanation." Li residence. Li Mu carried the lunchbox and walked out of the house. He had planned to bring breakfast for the Empress the next day. However, that morning he and Lu Hanyan were entangled in bed and missed the time. He had no choice but to raise the carp for another 3 days. He could not bring the fish soup to court. Before morning court, he passed the lunchbox to Mr. May. Mr. May opened the lunchbox and smelled it. He glanced at Li Mu and said, "At least you have a conscience." In the past, the morning court was mostly about trivial matters. There were no major issues. However, compared to the past, there were more unexpected situations today. There were officials from all over the country. Recently, there were more signs of demon sect activities in their jurisdictions. This caused some instability in the counties. County Magistrate Yushan even came to Fairy's capital personally to report the murder of 2 officials in County Magistrate Yushan. The officials were all filled with righteous indignation. Murdering an official of the Imperial Court. We must not let them off lightly. Damn demon sect. They are indeed a great threat to the Great Zhou. One day the Imperial Court will completely eradicate the evildoers of the demon sect. Some were indignant while others were puzzled. That's strange. Although the demon sect has always wanted to overthrow the Imperial Court, they rarely attack officials directly. An official thought for a moment and asked, "Could it be that the top scholar killed too many demon sect masters a few days ago and attracted the revenge of the demon sect?" Once this was said, it triggered a new round of discussion. What's going on? You still don't know? It said that when Commander Shangguan and the others were chasing after Cui Ming, they accidentally fell into Cui Ming's trap. It was Zhuang Yuanlang who helped them escape, took down Cui Ming, and even killed an expert from the Devil Sect. After that, Zhuang Yuanlang was listed as a wanted man by the Devil Sect. It said that the Devil Sect put a very high bounty on his head and attracted a lot of experts, but they were all killed by him. He killed more than 25th level experts, and there's even a rumor that even the great elder of the Soul Sect, the 6th level Netherhell Saint, died in his hands. That's too exaggerated. More than 25th realm masters and 1/6th realm master. The top scholar's cultivation is only at the 4th realm. Although his cultivation isn't high, he must have a treasure bestowed by Her Majesty. I heard that in Jianghu County, someone even saw the Empress's avatar descend. That Netherhell Saint must have died in the hands of the Empress avatar. In the Imperial Court, the officials were discussing fervently. The topic quickly shifted to the demon sect in Li Mu. Many people were shocked to the point of disbelief when they heard that Li Mu had killed dozens of demon sect 5th realm masters. More than 25th realm masters. Among the 100 people standing in the Golden Palace, there were only 25th realm masters. Even if they were to calculate, it might not be enough for Li Mu to kill. In the Great Zhou's 36 counties, the county governors and county ministers were all 5th realm masters. There were less than 100 of them in total. If more than 20 of them were killed by the demon sect, the transcending state masters of the Great Zhou would probably join forces and attack the demon sect's lair. Moreover, other than the death of more than 25th realm masters, the demon sect also lost a branch sect's 1st elder and a 6th realm master. If they were to calculate, if they only killed 2 minor officials of the Imperial Court to vent their anger, then the demon sect was already very rational. They were even more rational than the Great Zhou Court. It was inconceivable that a 4th realm cultivator could achieve such a feat. However, it also proved how much Her Majesty doted on Li Mu. She must have given Li Mu countless high-level fulu and magic treasures. She even sacrificed her own cultivation and sent her avatar to help him. Was this how a favored official should be treated? Even a favored concubine wouldn't be treated this way, right? Since ancient times, the emperors who were known for their incompetence actually doted on their demon concubines and demon empresses so much. Of course, their countries didn't escape the fate of being destroyed in the end. The 25th realm masters of the demon sect, including the Nether Saint, were killed by a 4th realm cultivator. They must have felt very aggrieved when they died. Some of the officials even felt that their deaths were unjust. Because their opponent wasn't Li Mu, but the great Zhou imperial treasury. They even guessed that if the person who wanted to kill Li Mu was a 7th realm master of the demon sect, the empress would probably come personally. So many experts of the demon sect had died, but the officials were only shocked for a moment. 2 7th rank officials had died, but the investigation had to be carried out. This was the principle of the imperial court. The Department of Offerings had sent 5 Blessed Realm offerings to Yu County with the Yushan County chief to chase after the culprit. This was enough to show how much importance the imperial court attached to this case. When Li Mu walked out of Crepe Myrtle Hall, he was very unconvinced. He had killed so many experts of the demon sect. This was a great contribution to the imperial court. Some bastard officials even wanted to blame the deaths of the 2 officials of Yushan County on him. What did this have to do with him? If the demon sect wanted to take revenge, he couldn't stop them. However, if those 2 officials had really died because of the demon sect's revenge, Li Mu would still feel very apologetic. If the trash of the demon sect wanted to take revenge, they could come to him. Why did they have to vent their anger on innocent people? When his cultivation improved a little more, he would equip the Fulu school with a bunch of heaven-rank Fulu. Sooner or later, he would wipe out the nests of the 10 demon sects. After the imperial court, Zhou Yi returned to Jianghu Palace. Mr. Mei walked in with a soup bowl. "Your Majesty, this is the soup that Li Mu made for you. He gave it to me before the imperial court. He also told your Majesty to drink it while it's hot." Zhou Yi could already smell her favorite Crucian carp tofu soup. It had been a long time since she drank the soup personally made by Li Mu. After Mr. Mei filled a bowl for her, she picked up the spoon and took a small sip. Then her brows furrowed slightly. "That's not right," Mr. Mei was surprised. "What's wrong? Doesn't it taste good?" Zhou Yi shook her head. "It tastes good, but it doesn't taste like what he made." She closed her eyes and counted with her fingers. Her expression was somewhat complicated. After drinking another mouthful of soup, she looked at Mr. Mei and said, "I think it's better to give her a title of nobility." Mr. Mei froze for a moment. He quickly realized who she was talking about. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Then the jade bracelet and the golden hairpin, no?" Chapter 352. Mr. Mei's visit today surprised Li Mu. She was here to reward Lu Hanyan on behalf of the Empress. Li Mu was a 5th rank official, and Lu Hanyan was also given a 5th rank title by the Empress. Although the rank of a lady was lower than that of her husband, there were many officials in the imperial court, and not all the wives of officials could have such an honor. In a family, the husband was an official in the imperial court, and the wife was a lady. Only then could she be considered to have entered the circle of nobles. Li Mu had no interest in entering this circle. He just felt that this set of ladies' clothes looked beautiful on Lu Hanyan. Yinin, Miao Miao, and the others happened to be in the residence. They urged Lu Hanyan to put on the dress and then surrounded her with envy. Like officials, a lady had a rank and salary. For a woman, having a lady's title was equivalent to entering the ranks of nobles. Yinin looked around and asked curiously, "Is this the only dress?" Lu Hanyan asked, "What else?" Yinin said, "Even if there isn't any precious jewelry, there should be silk or something like that." "Her Majesty is too stingy," Lu Hanyan defended the Empress and said, "Don't say that about Her Majesty. I didn't do anything and I got a lady's title. This is already Her Majesty's special gift." Miao Miao said, "Although you didn't do anything, brother-in-law did a lot of things. It's the same as what you did. In a few days you will be a real family." There was less than half a month before the wedding. Li Mu had prepared most of the things that needed to be prepared. Yinin, Miao Miao, and the others were here to accompany Lu Hanyan to shop. It just so happened that Li Mu was also on break, so he followed behind them and helped them carry their things. Shopping with women was a very troublesome thing. Li Mu bought things decisively and straightforwardly. Once he saw something he liked, he would pay the bill. They, on the other hand, had to pick and choose and shop around. Even though she was not short of money now, she still enjoyed this kind of thing. Lu Hanyan and the girls walked out of a rouge shop. On the street, A young man suddenly walked up and asked in surprise, "Miss Hanyan, is it really you?" Lu Hanyan looked at him and asked doubtfully, "You are?" The young man said, "I am Du Ming, a student of the Myriad Scroll Academy. I used to listen to you play a lot. Don't you remember me?" Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and replied politely, "Oh, it's young master Du, I remember." Du looked at her and asked, "Miss Hanyan, are you still there? Ever since you left, there weren't many musicians who were worth listening to." Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "I'm not there anymore." Du Ming asked, "I don't know which music house Miss Hanyan is playing in now. In the future I will definitely support you." "Alright, I'm holding a banquet at the Fragrance House today. I don't know if Miss Hanyan can do me the honor." As soon as he finished speaking, someone suddenly patted his shoulder. Du Ming frowned. When he turned around he was immediately frightened. He said in a trembling voice, "Li Mu, what do you want?" The people who were taken out of the academy by Li Mu were now either dead or sentenced. This caused him to be nervous when he saw Li Mu. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Treating my wife to a meal. I want to ask, what do you want to do?" Du Ming looked at him and then looked at Lu Hanyan. He was shocked, but he quickly came back to his senses. He immediately said, Sorry, I didn't know Miss Hanyan was your wife. I didn't mean to offend you. I'll leave now. After he finished speaking, he quickly left and didn't dare to look at Lu Hanyan again. Seeing Du Ming run away, Yining smiled and said, "It's good to have brother-in-law. In the past, these people were always pestering us and couldn't be chased away. Now let's see who dares to bother Sister Hanyan." Not far away, Du Ming had already run far away and was still in shock. A few young people stood in place. One of them looked at him and asked, "Didn't you say you saw someone familiar? Why did you come back so quickly? Did you get the wrong person?" Du Ming looked in a certain direction and still couldn't believe it. He muttered, "How did Miss Hanyan become his wife?" When they heard this, they were all stunned. "What? That Li Mu has a wife? Didn't they say he was still a virgin? Miss Hanyan? Could it be the top musician of the Great Music Workshop 2 years ago? Didn't she leave Shindu? How did she get involved with Li Mu?" The name Lu Hanyan was quite famous in the divine capital. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also very good at music. She was loved by some people who liked music. Later on, she left the divine capital for no reason. In a small area, she caused quite a commotion. Other than liking her music, Du Ming also admired her. At that time he was disappointed for a long time. This time, when he saw her in the divine capital, he was filled with surprise and joy. The flame in his heart that had been extinguished was reignited. Then it was extinguished by Li Mu's cold water. He looked in a certain direction and sighed. What a pity, what a pity. When the two of them returned home after shopping, Li Mu was carrying something in one hand and holding her hand with the other. A commoner saw this and said in surprise, "Lord Li, this lady is..." Li Mu smiled and explained, "She's my wife." The commoner was puzzled. "Is Lord Li married?" Li Mu replied, "Not yet, but it will be next month. If you have time, come and join the wedding." "Congratulations, Lord Li, congratulations. Mrs. Li is so beautiful. She and Lord Li are a perfect match. I wish Lord Li and Mrs. Li a long life together and have a child soon." They walked through the streets and alleys. From time to time, the commoners would ask questions. Li Mu patiently explained to each and every one of them. Listening to the blessings of the commoners, Lu Hanyan's face was filled with shyness, but her eyes were filled with happiness. Li Mu had always been a hot topic in the divine capital. In the past half a year, every discussion in the divine capital was related to him. Once the news of him getting married on the 9th of the next month spread out, it quickly became the topic of the commoners' discussion. "I wonder which lady is so lucky to be able to marry Lord Li. I really envy her. Sigh, poor old man's 3 beautiful daughters. They're about to give up. I wonder if Lord Li will accept concubines? Forget it. Lord Li has done us a favor. If you want to repay kindness with enmity, we won't allow it. I saw that lady just now. She's very beautiful. She's worthy of Lord Li." Lord Li reminded me of that Lord Li from more than 10 years ago. He was also a good official who made decisions for the commoners. I think his surname was also Li. Unfortunately, sigh, I remember too. Unfortunately, Lord Li didn't meet a wise ruler. The previous emperor wasn't Her Majesty the Empress. The house Lord Li is living in now is the Li residence from back then. Those who killed him back then will die a horrible death. Shoo, you don't want to live anymore. If someone hears you, even if you have 10 heads, it won't be enough to chop them off. The 7th of the 10th month. Today was not a special day. The residences of some officials and nobles were as usual. However, the market where the commoners lived was as lively as a festival. 2 days later was the day of Lord Li's wedding. From today onwards, many shops in the divine capital would sell their goods at a discount to celebrate the occasion. Some commoners hung large red lanterns in front of their houses even though there was no joyous occasion. The streets and alleys were pasted with the word happy. Those who knew would naturally know that Lord Li was getting married. Those who didn't know would think that His Majesty was appointing an empress. Even when the previous emperor appointed an empress, the commoners didn't celebrate spontaneously like this. Countless officials in the imperial court didn't like Li Mu's way of doing things. However, when they saw this scene, they couldn't help but admire him from the bottom of their hearts. As an official, what more could he ask for? As the 9th of the 10th month approached, the streets and alleys were discussing the upcoming wedding. A woman wearing a bamboo hat slowly walked onto the streets of the divine capital. Although her attire was different from ordinary people, it didn't attract any special attention. There were always some people who didn't want to show their faces in public for some special reason. It wasn't uncommon for them to wear veils or cloaks when they went out. The woman seemed to be very familiar with the divine capital. She walked through the streets with great familiarity. Finally, she walked into the north court and stood in front of a tall door. The words Li Residence were written on the plaque in front of the door. The woman's gaze passed through the black veil of her bamboo hat and stared at the 2 words for a long time. This family seemed to have a joyous occasion recently. There was red satin hanging on the plaque. The word happy was also pasted on the 2 large red lanterns. Creak. The door opened from the inside. An unusually beautiful girl around 18 or 19 years old walked out. She asked in confusion, "Sister, who are you looking for?" The woman didn't answer. She slowly turned and left. Xiao Bai closed the door and walked back. Wan Wan poked her head out of the garden and asked, "Who is it?" Xiao Bai shook her head and said, "I don't know. She must have entered the wrong door." Outside the door, the woman walked 100 steps before a peddler carrying a load walked over. The woman stopped the peddler and pointed at the residence in front. She asked softly, "Excuse me, may I ask who lives in the Li residence in front?" The peddler thought that someone was buying and was just feeling happy. However, when he heard that the woman was asking for directions, he became rather displeased. However, when he looked in the direction the woman was pointing at, he immediately beamed with joy again. He put down his load and said, "Miss, you must be a foreigner. If you're from the divine capital, you definitely know who lives there. Lord Li is the justice in our hearts. He doesn't fear the powerful and has redressed the grievances of countless people. This residence was bestowed to him by the Empress." Speaking of Lord Li, the peddler began to talk endlessly. At a certain moment he saw 2 figures walking over from the front. He said, "What a coincidence. That's Lord Li and his wife. Miss, don't you think they're a match made in heaven?" There was no sound from beside him. The peddler turned around and suddenly shivered. There was no one beside him. There was no girl. It was noon and the sun was warm, but he felt a chill rushing from his tailbone to his brain. He grabbed his load and ran toward the crowded street. In front of the Li residence, Li Mu held Lu Hanyan's hand. Just as he was about to step through the door, he suddenly sensed something and turned to look in a certain direction. There was only a peddler carrying a load there. For some reason he was running for his life. Lu Hanyan saw him stop and also looked back. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Let's go in." Chapter 353. At that moment, Li Mu inexplicably felt a strong throbbing in his heart. For cultivators who had refined their 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, it was rare for them to have such a feeling. Most of their senses had a reason, but when Li Mu looked over, he did not find anything. The 2 of them walked into the house and the door of the Li residence closed. In a shallow alley in the north court, in a place that Li Mu could not see, a woman leaned against the wall. Her face under the cloak was extremely pale. The 8th of October. There was only 1 day left until the wedding day. Lu Hanyan returned to the Great Music Lane, which she regarded as her maiden home. Tomorrow, Li Mu would bring her back in a palanquin with 8 carriers. As the wedding day approached, Li Mu became leisurely. He did not invite many people and there were not many guests coming tomorrow. Fu Daozi was still in seclusion. Yu Zhenzi and Hyun Jinko came as representatives of the Fulu school. Although the headmaster and the other peak chiefs did not come, they still sent their gifts. The talismans on Li Mu's body had been almost used up in the battle with the killers of the Devil's Doctrine. He took advantage of this wedding to replenish them. Hanja and junior sister Qin also came with Xianxia and the others. Hanja looked at Li Mu with regret and said, "Actually, I thought that you and Li..." Before he could finish, he was kicked by Li Si behind him. Zhang Shan covered his mouth from behind and dragged him away. After a while, Hanja came back and said, "No matter what, congratulations to you for marrying such a good woman like Martial Aunt Lu. I wonder where my future Dao companion is now." Junior sister Qin casually walked in front of Hanja, coughed softly and puffed out her small chest. Hanja glanced at junior sister Qin and looked at Qin Miao Miao, who was standing beside Li Si and had lost a lot of weight. He said, "Even Li Si has junior sister Qin. God is really unfair." Qin Miao Miao also came with Li Si this time. She had an earth elemental body. Before her cultivation reached a high level, her body shape would be different from ordinary people. But after cultivation she was much thinner than before. Of course, even if she had lost half of her weight, Li Si still looked like a little bird standing beside her. Li Mu's eyes inadvertently glanced and saw a figure passing by outside the door. He was surprised and did not know why Zhou Zhong would appear here. Come. Other than his two old friends Zhang Chun and Li Si, Li Mu did not invite any of the officials of the court. Zhou Zhong belonged to the opposing camp. He could not have come to congratulate Li Mu on his marriage. Li Mu walked out of the gate and saw Zhou Zhong standing beside the carriage looking at the gate of the Li estate. Li Mu walked over and asked, "Assistant Minister Zhou, is something the matter?" Zhou Zhong looked at the plaque of the Li estate and said indifferently, "Nothing." Li Mu remembered that Zhou Zhong had once said that this was the residence of a friend of his. The original owner of the Li estate seemed to have been a criminal official, but Li Mu did not know what crime he had committed. These 2 days were good days. He could temporarily put aside the matter of the camp. Li Mu said, "Assistant Minister Zhou, do you want to go in and have a cup of tea before you leave?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "Today is the death anniversary of my old friend. I'm not in the mood for tea." Li Mu's face darkened. The little good impression he had of Zhou Zhong disappeared. Bang! Li Mu walked through the gate, and the gate of the Li estate closed with a loud bang. Even if today was the death anniversary of his old friend, he should not have said it in front of Li Mu, who was about to get married. If he was not the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, being caught and beaten for speaking so rudely before someone's wedding was already a light punishment. If he met someone with a bad temper, he would probably be hung up and beaten. Tomorrow was the day of the wedding. Li Mu did not want to be affected by these matters. He took a deep breath and threw Zhou Zhong to the back of his mind. The 9th day of the 10th month. The festive atmosphere in the divine capital reached its peak on this day. Li Mu had too many labels on him. The top scholar, the empress favored minister, the divine capital's righteous sky. At noon, when he rode on his horse and married his bride, the streets of the divine capital were empty. There were only a few tables set up for the wedding banquet in the Li estate. However, on the wide street outside the Li estate, the crowd was crowded with heads and feet. There was a row of long tables on both sides of the street outside the estate. No matter the identity of the guests, they could drink a cup of wine here. The commoners lined up outside the Li estate, fighting to be the first to present congratulatory gifts. Some gave half a piece of cloth, while others gave a pair of red candles. Although they were not valuable, it was a token of their sincerity. The entire northern court had never been so lively since the day it was built. Of course, to the high officials and nobles who were used to the tranquility of the northern court, this was noisy. An official sat in his own courtyard. Hearing the noise outside the door, he said unhappily, "So annoying. Isn't it just a wedding? Why do they have to make such a big scene?" His wife stood beside him and said, "They did not make such a big scene. This is the celebration of the commoners. When master can make the commoners like this, I will wake up laughing in my dreams." The official pursed his lips and said unhappily, "What's the point of winning over these unruly commoners? He doesn't have many friends in the imperial court." His wife looked at him and said disdainfully, "Those in the imperial court can be considered friends. They call you friends on the surface, but who knows how they are scheming against you behind your back." In another mansion, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel stood in the courtyard. He was not affected by the noise outside at all. He walked into the study and asked, "Are you sure?" An official in the study said with a gloomy face, "Qianhe County Minister Hou Bai, Ani County Magistrate Ding Yun, Baiyu County Magistrate Deng Zhua, and Zhongshan County Magistrate Huang Ding." Sir, don't you think these names are familiar? The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel narrowed his eyes and said, "It is indeed the four of them." The official said, 14 years ago, the four of them were all in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. They were also involved in that incident. 14 years later they were killed one after another. These cases were not done by the demon sect. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "You mean that someone is avenging that person?" The official said, "There is no other possibility." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel narrowed his eyes and said, 14 years have passed, and they are still so persistent. Who could it be? Did someone from the Li family escape the net? The official thought for a moment and said, "The entire Li family was wiped out back then. There can't be anyone who escaped the net." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel scoffed and said, "No matter who it is, just capture them and deal with them. If he can make a move on these four people, he won't let other targets go. He probably doesn't have the guts to do so in Shindu. Check where the officials who were involved in this incident are now." The official said, "I've already checked. There was a minister counselor back then. He is now in Yantai County as the Yantai County magistrate. He is at the peak of the fourth realm. From the looks of these cases, the culprit's strength is not higher than the fifth realm. Should we inform the office of worship and have them deal with that person outside to avoid unnecessary trouble?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel laughed mockingly and said, "Unnecessary trouble? Haha, if you want to overturn that case, you have to overturn the imperial court first. No one has the ability to do that. Whether it is the new party or the old party or His Majesty, none of them will let that happen." The official asked, "Then what do you mean?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "Have the people from the Department of Offerings guard Yantai County. According to the law, the culprit should be brought back to Luoyang to be punished for murdering an official of the imperial court. Have them follow the rules and don't do anything unnecessary. Bring him back to Luoyang." "I'd like to see who is so overconfident." The official nodded and said, "Yes." A moment later he walked out of the residence of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and passed through the bustling crowd outside. When he passed by the Li Manor, he even looked inside curiously. In the Li Manor, the wedding ceremony had already begun. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan did not have any relatives. They were only friends in the manor. Mr. Mei was the host of the wedding. He stood in front with a smile on his face. "First bow to heaven and earth. Second bow, if there are no parents, then bow to master. Husband and wife bow to each other. Send them to the bridal chamber." Tonight was a joyous night in the Li Manor. Both inside and outside the manor were filled with jubilation. In the bridal chamber, Li Mu slowly lifted Lu Hanyan's veil. The two looked at each other and raised their wine cups. As their arms crossed, countless bright fireworks rose into the night sky outside the window, blooming with dazzling colors. In a wine shop in Shindu, the bright fireworks lit up the night sky and also illuminated the beautiful face of the woman in the wine shop after she took off her bamboo hat. She picked up the wine jar and finished it in one gulp. Putting on her bamboo hat, she turned and walked out of the wine shop. Looking in the direction of the fireworks, she whispered, "Congratulations, Chang'e Palace." Zhou Yi leaned lazily on the chair and took a sip of wine. He frowned and said, "What kind of tribute wine is this? It has no taste at all. Don't send it next year." Chapter 354. The past night was destined to be a sleepless night for many people in the divine capital. The famous Lord Li had just gotten married. Who knew how many women in the divine capital were sad? He was the top scholar in both civil and military affairs, the empress' favorite, the messenger of justice and the people's justice. He was also so handsome. For the young women in the divine capital, he was undoubtedly the ideal husband candidate. Especially for such a man. He hadn't even gotten married yet. Some women who thought they were pretty would intentionally or unintentionally linger in front of the Li Manor, fantasizing about having a romantic encounter with him and becoming the mistress of the Li Manor in the future. Before Li Mu's wedding they still had some hope. Now their hopes were dashed. They couldn't feel any jealousy towards that lucky woman. They could only wish them happiness. Li Manor. The sun had already risen to the top of their heads. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan walked out of the room. Lu Hanyan's face was rosy. She hid the smile in her eyes. Li Mu, on the other hand, was gloomy and unhappy. Just last night the two of them finally had their first yin-yang dual cultivation. The process of dual cultivation was undoubtedly very happy. But the result was unacceptable to Li Mu. Last night their yin and yang merged. Many years of pure yang and pure yin power flowed in their bodies. Lu Hanyan's cultivation successfully broke through to the 5th level. Li Mu's cultivation also experienced a surge, but he was still stuck at the peak of the 4th level. He was still one step away from the 5th level. However, this step was the most difficult step. Some people could take this step in a few days. Some needed half a month. Some took 3 to 5 years. Some took 30 to 50 years. There was no pattern. Li Mu started cultivating before Lu Hanyan. He was also the one who led her onto the path of cultivation. But she broke through to the 5th level before Li Mu. Li Mu was so angry that he trembled. Was he destined to be under a woman for the rest of his life? Damn the heavens. They were both yin and yang dual cultivators. This was too unfair to him. Lu Hanyan held his arm and comforted him. Don't be discouraged. Maybe you'll break through in a few days. In the future I'll protect you. Although she was comforting Li Mu, there was an unconcealable pride in her tone. Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Do I look like someone who needs a woman's protection?" As he spoke, his voice became softer and softer, because he realized that he really was that kind of person. In terms of safety, they used to rely on Li Qin, then Su He, and then the Empress. In terms of finances, they had always relied on Lu Hanyan. Only when he thought about it carefully did he realize that he had been relying on women all this time. Now that even Lu Hanyan's cultivation was higher than his, Li Mu couldn't help but feel a little sour in his heart. What son of heaven? Maybe he was just a son adopted by the heavens. After the meal, Li Mu decided to enter the palace. Yesterday's wedding went so smoothly. In fact, to a large extent, it was thanks to the Empress. Li Mu didn't have any maids or servants at home, so she asked Mr. Mei to bring some maids from the palace. The dishes at the wedding banquet were prepared by the imperial chef she sent to the palace. The wedding wine prepared for the guests was also the tribute wine she sent from the palace. Although she didn't come herself, she asked Mr. Mei to arrange his wedding very well. Jianghu Palace. Li Mu walked into the hall. The Empress, who was reading the memorials, didn't even raise her head. She asked, "Why did you come to the palace instead of staying at home with the bride?" Li Mu handed a few food boxes with dishes he made to Mr. Mei and said, "Your Majesty helped me with my wedding. I'm here to thank you." Zhou looked up at him and said, "If you really want to thank me, then help me read these memorials. There are endless memorials every day. It's so annoying." Li Mu found that the Empress was becoming more and more presumptuous after they became familiar with each other. There are endless memorials every day. It's so annoying. Is this something an Empress should say? Even if she was really annoyed, she couldn't say it out loud. Wise emperors were all busy at night. Only a fatuous emperor would be annoyed by the memorials. If this sentence was written down, it would leave a bad name in the future. In the past, she would still pretend and put on airs in front of Li Mu. Now she didn't even want to pretend. Li Mu wanted to help her, but the harem couldn't interfere with politics. How could a minister help the emperor deal with memorials? If this was known, a favored minister would never be able to get rid of the label of messing up the government. Li Mu shook his head and said helplessly, "Your Majesty, this isn't very good." Zhou Qiong looked at him disappointedly and said, "I understand now. You used to say that you would go through water and tread on fire for me, but it was all fake. You weren't even willing to help me look at the memorials, let alone go through water and tread on fire." Li Mu walked up and said helplessly, I'll see, okay?" The Empress completely revealed her true nature in front of him today. She didn't even pretend anymore. She even used Li Mu's words to trick him. If Li Mu refused, it would mean that what he said to the Empress before was all false. Mr. Mei put the food in the food boxes on the table. Li Mu picked up the pile of memorials and went to the corner. The memorials presented by each ministry were sorted according to their importance. The Empress had already dealt with the most important memorials. The rest were the less important ones. There were 36 counties and hundreds of counties in the Great Zhou. Even though the ministries had solved most of the problems, there were still many things left for the Empress to deal with. Zhou was eating leisurely at the side. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "I haven't seen you for a few days. Your cultivation has improved a lot." Li Mu explained, "Because I have a pure yang body and my wife has a pure yin body. When pure yang and pure yin mixed together, it would produce an incomparably strange power. It had the effect of increasing mana and breaking through the barrier of cultivation." Li Mu didn't say it explicitly, but anyone could understand what he was implying. He meant that last night they mixed their yin and yang. Zhou instantly felt that the food in front of her didn't smell so good. Not only that, Li Mu's words made her involuntarily think of the scene of their yin and yang mixing together. She, who had never experienced such a scene, wouldn't have thought of it. But she happened to see Li Mu's dream. The more she wanted to forget, the clearer the scene became. She could erase other people's memories, but she couldn't erase her own. If her memories were lost, her inner demons would still exist. This would cause her even more trouble. Her inner demons could be suppressed with the art of clear mind, but some thoughts couldn't. The courtier that originally belonged to her had become another woman's husband. They lived in the house that she bestowed upon them, and used the things that she bestowed upon them. She couldn't even go there anymore. Zhou Qiong admitted that she was a little envious. After having a wife, Li Mu's thoughts couldn't be wholeheartedly focused on the palace. He hadn't used the spirit snail she gave him for a long time. What made her feel conflicted was that she felt that Mei Wei was right. Although Li Mu was her minister, he should also have his own life. She shouldn't be too demanding of him and shouldn't be too possessive of him. But why did she still feel so uncomfortable? It was as if her sisters had taken away her beloved doll when she was young. At this moment, the closer she got to Li Mu, the more chaotic her heart became. She put down her chopsticks, stood up and said, "Look first. I'm going out for a walk." The Empress chose to be an empress who didn't do anything. Li Mu could continue to help her deal with the memorials. She didn't know about these memorials until she saw them. She didn't know that being an empress was so difficult. There were already a lot of things to do in the 36 counties of Great Zhou. As the superior country of Zhuzhou, Great Zhou also had to deal with the affairs of other countries in Zhuzhou. In some small countries there was a coup d'état. The orthodox royal family would ask for help from Great Zhou. There were also some small countries that were invaded by demons and demons. They couldn't resist with their own strength, so they would ask for help from Great Zhou. The ministers didn't have the right to make these decisions. In the end, it was up to the Empress to make the decision. Li Mu couldn't make these decisions for the Empress, so he picked out these memorials and put them aside. As for the matters within the Great Zhou dynasty, especially after the various levels of approval, as long as the Empress's written instructions were approved, Li Mu would approve them for her. After he finished dealing with the memorials, the Empress still hadn't returned. Li Mu left Chang'e Palace and went to the Secretariat. In addition to helping the Empress, he also had his own matters to deal with. When Li Mu walked into his office, he found that there were a few more booklets on the table in his office. Among the 6 officials of the Secretariat, he was in charge of the Ministry of Justice. He was the busiest. Li Mu opened a few memorials and found that they were from Yushan County. Yushan County's Baiyu County Magistrate and Zhongshan County Magistrate were suspected to have died in revenge from the demon sect. The Yushan County Magistrate had personally come to the Immortal's capital to report this matter, which was a step faster than the memorials from the county government. The Imperial Court had already sent the Consecration Department to investigate this case. They just had to wait for the results. Li Mu flipped through the 2 memorials and put them aside, preparing to read the next one. He had already picked up a new one, but he seemed to have realized something and put it down again. Li Mu opened the 2 memorials again and put them together. He found that the Baiyu County Magistrate and Zhongshan County Magistrate had both been transferred out of the Ministry of Personnel before they went to work. Moreover, their official positions were in charge of the Ministry of Personnel. There was only a difference of a few months when they were transferred out of the Ministry of Personnel. If he remembered correctly, the Ani County Magistrate and Tianhe County Magistrate who had died seemed to have experience as officials in the Ministry of Personnel. However, Li Mu did not know what official position they had in detail. Within half a year, 4 officials from the Ministry of Personnel had died. This was too much of a coincidence. If the deaths of the first 2 officials and the 2 officials from Yushan County were committed by the same culprit, then this case had nothing to do with the demon sect. The Imperial Court had investigated in the wrong direction, because from the timeline when the first 2 officials died, Li Mu had not yet provoked the demon sect. After discovering the connection between these cases, Li Mu went directly to the Ministry of Justice. He found the director of the Ministry of Justice and asked, who was investigating the assassination of the 2 officials from Hanyang County and Danyang County? The director of the Ministry of Justice said, it was Manager Wei. Li Mu said, let him come. The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the Yamen and quickly found Wei Peng. Li Mu looked at Wei Peng and asked, what position did the Tianhe County Magistrate and Ani County Magistrate hold in the Ministry of Personnel? Wei Peng thought for a moment and said, Manager of the Ministry of Personnel. Li Mu was surprised. Manager of the Ministry of Personnel again? After saying that, he continued to ask, "Do you know when they were the managers of the Ministry of Personnel?" Wei Peng clearly remembered this matter very clearly. He did not think too much and said, "About 12 or 13 years ago, the 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel at the same time had all been promoted in half a year. Then 12 or 13 years later, within half a year, they all died of unnatural causes." What this meant was self-evident. Li Mu frowned slightly and muttered, "What happened during that time?" Chapter 355. Li Mu had originally thought that these cases were the work of the demon sect. However, when he followed the clues to this point, he was shocked to find that things were not as simple as they seemed. 3 counties and 4 counties for cases, all pointed to the Ministry of Personnel. If these 4 cases were all done by the same person, then the severity and viciousness of these cases would be raised by several levels. Li Mu immediately made a decision and said, "Someone, come with me to the Ministry of Personnel." The director of the Ministry of Justice glanced at Wei Peng and said, "Why aren't you following Lord Li?" After analyzing the clues of these cases, Li Mu believed that the final answer lay in the Ministry of Personnel. The Ministry of Personnel was not far from the Ministry of Justice, so they arrived quickly. Wei Peng was already a frequent visitor to the Ministry of Personnel, so he quickly sent for detailed information on the 4 assassinated officials. Managers of the Ministry of Personnel at the same time, promoted at the same time, and assassinated at the same time. Li Mu looked at the 4 sets of information and said, "There should be another one. Check, who else was promoted at the Ministry of Personnel during that time?" After the minor official flipped through the files, he said, "There's one more person, Lord Yu, who was the Minister Counselor at the time." After the 4 managers were promoted, he was quickly transferred to Yantai County and promoted to Yantai County Lieutenant. Li Mu could already guess that the reason for these people's promotions more than 10 years ago was probably the reason for their deaths more than 10 years later. Obviously, as long as he found out why they were promoted more than 10 years ago, he would be able to find out the identity of the mastermind behind these cases. Li Mu continued to ask, "Do you know the reason for their promotions?" The minor official shook his head and said, "I've only been in the Ministry of Personnel for 3 years, so I don't know what happened more than 10 years ago. If Lord Li wants to know what happened more than 10 years ago, you can ask me directly." Seeing a middle-aged man walk in, the minor official immediately bowed and said, "Lord Assistant Minister." Li Mu looked at the man, his eyes slightly focused, and said calmly, "Assistant Minister Chen." Li Mu and this left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel had quite a bit of enmity between them. The wife of the county magistrate of Yang County who was killed by Xiao Yu was this person's sister. At that time, the enmity between him and Li Mu had already been formed. After that, Li Mu came to the divine capital and scolded this person in the imperial court. He didn't leave him any face, and this caused the enmity between them to deepen. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said slowly, "More than 10 years ago, there was an official in the Ministry of Personnel who colluded with the enemy and committed treason. He was exposed by the other officials in the Ministry of Personnel. Later, that official's entire family was executed. The other officials in the Ministry of Personnel were all promoted and placed in important positions. The officials who died were all promoted during that period. It was obvious that they were retaliated against by the remnants of the guilty officials' party. However, the honored masters of the Department of Offerings have already gone to Yantai County. I believe that the culprit will be arrested very soon." He didn't expect the Ministry of Personnel to have already found out about this. Li Mu didn't need to make this trip. He was about to leave when the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel suddenly smiled and said, "Lord Li, you may not know this, but the Li residence you're living in now is the residence of that guilty official. The day before your wedding is the anniversary of the death of that guilty official's family. I wonder if you heard the screams of their ghosts on your wedding night?" Before the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel finished speaking, his expression changed abruptly. A beam of golden light flew out of Li Mu's ear and shot toward him. The golden light was initially the size of a grain of rice, but it quickly turned into a giant bell. It crashed into him like a speeding carriage. White light flashed on the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and instantly formed a shield. However, the protective barrier was like a piece of paper when it was struck by the enormous bell. It was directly shattered. The giant bell didn't slow down and crashed into the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. He crashed heavily into the wall of the Ministry of Personnel and spat out another mouthful of blood. He fell to the ground and pointed at Li Mu. He said furiously, You dare? The law bell floated above Li Mu's shoulder. Li Mu walked to the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and said calmly, "Watch your mouth. If there's a next time, it won't just be a few broken ribs." He took one last look at the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and turned to leave. Seeing this, the other officials of the Ministry of Personnel all returned to their duty rooms. They didn't dare to watch. Although beating up an official of the imperial court was punishable, the assistant minister had brought this upon himself. Anyone who had just gotten married wouldn't be in a good mood after hearing his words. If it were someone else, they might be in trouble. However, Lord Li was His Majesty's favorite official. If the assistant minister dared to make a big deal out of this, he would be the one to suffer in the end. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel got up from the ground and fixed his ribs with a solemn expression. He patted the dust off his body and walked out of the Ministry of Personnel. He was just trying to show off. He didn't expect that Li Mu would dare to beat him up in the Ministry of Personnel. Under the Empress' favor, this person was lawless. However, he could only endure today's humiliation for the time being. With how much the Empress doted on Li Mu, it wouldn't do him any good if this matter reached the imperial court. He walked out of the Ministry of Personnel and quickly arrived at the Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong looked at his sorry state and asked, "Lord Qin, what happened?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel didn't speak. Instead he asked, "Are you sure no one from the Li family escaped?" Zhou Zhong glanced at him and said, "You should know better than me." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel said, "I just remembered that he has a daughter. She wasn't in the divine capital at the time and couldn't be found. The 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel back then all died in the past half a year. I'm afraid she's the one behind this." Zhou Zhong asked, "Are you afraid that she'll come after you for revenge? Aren't you afraid? Don't forget that you stood on our side in the end." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel glanced at him and said, "However, she won't have the chance to come after us. The people from the Department of Worship have already set up an ambush in Yantai County. They should be able to capture her and bring her back to the divine capital soon. When that time comes, don't let her have the chance to say anything. Although this won't cause us much trouble, the higher-ups still don't want to hear any rumors." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Don't worry, I know." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel looked at him and said, "I'm worried that you'll remember our old friendship. Lord Zhou, you're a smart man. I believe that you'll make the right choice. You should know that we weren't the only ones who wanted him dead back then. Those who make everyone their enemy won't have a good ending." Zhou Zhong leaned back in his chair and said, "That's not necessarily the case." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel seemed to have thought of something. His chest where the giant bell hit him started to hurt again. His face immediately darkened and he said, "If it wasn't for the Emperor's protection, he would have died 1,000 times over. Just wait and see. No matter who wins in the end, between us and the Zhou family, he'll be the first to die. After he dies, the divine capital will remain the same as it was before." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel gloomily said a few more words and left the Ministry of Justice. The door to the assistant minister's office closed. Zhou Zhong slowly stood up from his chair. He clenched and unclenched his fists. His expression was conflicted and pained. He seemed to be making a difficult choice in his heart. When his gaze swept across the law of the great Zhou on the table, he stared at the 3 words for a long time before finally sitting down slowly. "I'm sorry." He closed his eyes and muttered softly. Then he curled up his body in the chair. Li Mu left the Ministry of Personnel and returned home. He vented all his anger from Zhou Zhong on the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Sure enough, he felt much better. Lu Hanyan had already finished cooking. She asked, "Why did you come back so late today?" Li Mu explained, "I helped the Empress approve some memorials. Then, I went to the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Personnel." "I was delayed for a while?" Lu Hanyan asked in surprise. "Why did you help the Empress approve memorials? That's going against the rules. Won't you be impeached?" Although Li Mu also approved some memorials, the ones that were sent to the Empress were all important matters. Not even the Prime Minister had the right to approve them, let alone a minister from the Secretariat. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. If she doesn't say anything and I don't say anything, no one will know." Lu Hanyan was still confused. She asked, "Why didn't Her Majesty approve them herself?" Li Mu said, "You don't know Her Majesty. She's actually very lazy when it comes to politics. You'll know when you get to know her in the future. But she hasn't been coming to our house recently. Maybe she's afraid of being upset." Lu Hanyan asked, "Upset by what?" Li Mu explained, seeing us being so lovey-dovey and thinking about how she's all alone she's upset. Aha! Mr. May stood at the door of the Li Manor with a box of food in his hand. He snorted loudly. Li Mu's expression changed instantly. He smiled and said, Sister May, you're just in time. Do you want to sit down and eat together? Mr. May was here to deliver the box of food. He handed it to Li Mu and glared at him. No need. I still have things to do in the palace. She was about to leave when Li Mu remembered something. He ran out of the door and said, Sister May, wait. Mr. May turned around and asked, What's the matter? Li Mu asked, Sister May, do you know who the previous owner of the Li Manor is? Mr. May was surprised. Why are you suddenly asking this? Li Mu said, I'm just curious. Mr. May looked around and nodded. I know. It's the former Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi. Li Mu said, I heard from the Ministry of Justice that he betrayed the country and his family was exterminated by the imperial court. Mr. May thought for a while and said, Lord Li is a really good official. He pushed for the reform of the law and proposed to abolish the Silver Act. He tried his best to stop the previous emperor from granting the death exemption. He did a lot of good things for the people. She suddenly looked at Li Mu and said, Actually, you're very similar to Lord Li. You're in a high position but what you do is for the people. Li Mu said in surprise, How could such a person betray the country? Mr. May shook his head and didn't explain further. Li Mu understood what she meant. What Li Mu and he did affected the interests of the privileged class in Luoyang. Their enemy wasn't one party in the imperial court, but all the parties combined. Without a reliable backer, this kind of reformer usually didn't have a good ending. He was lucky to have met the Empress. Otherwise his ending wouldn't be much better than Lord Li's. Li Mu had the Empress but Lord Li didn't. Li Mu asked, Did the previous emperor just watch this kind of loyal official be persecuted? Mr. May shook his head. He tried his best to stop the previous emperor from granting the death exemption. The previous emperor was also very dissatisfied with him. The previous emperor tacitly agreed to those people persecuting him. When Li Mu heard this, he was furious and cursed, This bastard. Mr. May knocked on his head and said, Mind your status. Is this something you can say? After that, she touched Li Mu's head and said, Let's not talk about that bastard. I forgot to tell you that starting tomorrow, you don't have to bring food to Her Majesty anymore. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, I can finally sleep more in the future. Mr. May said, You can cook in the imperial kitchen from now on. Li Mu was shocked. What? Mr. May glanced at him and asked, What? You don't want to? Did you forget what you said to Her Majesty before? You're willing to go through fire and water for her. Now you don't want to cook a few dishes for her? Were you lying to Her Majesty before? Li Mu looked at Mr. May blankly. Mr. May stared at him and asked, Why are you looking at me? Li Mu murmured, Why do you speak so much like Her Majesty? As a friend, I have to remind you that Her Majesty is different from you. At your age, you should be down-to-earth, considerate, and sensible. If you still play the little girl game, you might not be able to get married in this lifetime. Mr. May asked, What's different about Her Majesty? Li Mu looked around and whispered, You still have a chance to get married, but Her Majesty doesn't. Even if she wants to marry, no one dares to marry her. It's more likely that she marries someone else. For Mr. May, Li Mu felt like a younger brother who had a family and saw that no one wanted his older sister. She wasn't in a hurry and Li Mu was worried for her too. He had to let her know her place. Her age was comparable to two 18-year-old girls. If she couldn't recognize herself, she might still be alone when she was 80. For this reason, Li Mu even criticized the Empress behind her back again. However, he trusted Mr. May a lot. At most, she would give Li Mu a slap on the head, but she wouldn't complain to the Empress. Li Mu's trust in Mr. May completely collapsed when he slept next to Lu Hanyan at night and saw the Empress waiting for him with a whip in her dream. Chapter 356. In front of the Secretariat. Li Mu looked at Mr. May with resentful eyes, recalling the beating in his dream last night and said, You betrayed my trust. Mr. May's lips moved as if he wanted to explain, but she couldn't tell Li Mu that Her Majesty had disguised herself as her and visited the Li mansion incognito. She coughed softly and said, I didn't tell Her Majesty, but in Shindu, you can't hide it from her if you criticize Her Majesty behind her back. As Li Mu's cultivation improved and his knowledge widened, the mysterious veil of the masters of the upper realm had long been removed in his eyes. The Empress's cultivation was high, but it wasn't so high that she could know everything in the world just by sitting in the Jianghu palace. She could even hear Li Mu complaining about her. Now he began to wonder if the Empress had installed some kind of eavesdropping magic weapon on him. Or maybe when he was persuading Mr. Mei yesterday she used the dark light technique to spy on him, but he had a jade talisman that could shield the secrets of heaven, so the dark light technique couldn't spy on him. Could it be that the Empress blocked others and only gave herself permission? Just in case, Li Mu put the jade talisman that he carried with him into the teapot space. Most of the time he didn't care if the Empress spied on him, but today was different from the past. He still had some inconveniences every day. As for the thing that could shield the secrets of heaven, he could use Fulu instead. The secrets of heaven were hard to predict, but shielding them was easy. He had the lifetime experience of Talisman Daozi and the inheritance of the Taoist page, so it wasn't difficult to draw a Fulu to replace the shielding jade talisman. After parting with Mr. Mei, Li Mu walked into the secretariat. These days, Li Mu had dealt with all the memorials that he needed to deal with in time. Today he was only busy for more than 15 minutes and had nothing to do. Since he had nothing to do, he picked up a pen and wrote a name on a paper. Li Yi. This official with the same surname as him used to be a clear stream in the imperial court, but his ending was extremely regrettable. More than 10 years ago, for the sake of the people of Great Zhou, he made an enemy of the nobles of the imperial court. More than 10 years later, Li Mu was living in his old house, doing things that he had never finished. It seemed that fate existed in the unseen world. The 4 dead managers of the Ministry of Personnel were probably one of the people who had framed him back then. The real culprit behind their deaths was very likely a friend of Lord Li's. Li Mu felt a little regretful. Revenge was indeed satisfying, but the majesty of the law was not to be challenged. The 4 of them had broken the law and should be tried by the imperial court. He had killed many officials of the imperial court for personal gain. The circumstances were extremely bad. No matter what the reason was, he would not be able to escape death. At this point, Li Mu could not save him, but he wanted to do something for him, for the hero who had died in vain. Not for anything else but for the fate of a house. He left the secretariat and returned to the Ministry of Justice. As soon as the director of the Ministry of Justice saw him, he came out of the yamen and asked, "Does official Li have any orders?" Li Mu said, "I want to investigate a case." The director of the Ministry of Justice said, "Which case does official Li want to investigate? I will send someone to find it for you." Li Mu said, 14 years ago the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Li Yi, committed treason. The director of the Ministry of Justice trembled when he heard this, and his face immediately turned pale. Li Mu saw the change in his expression and asked, "Why, is there a problem?" The director of the Ministry of Justice pulled Li Mu into his yamen, and only then did he dare to take a breath and persuade Li Mu, "Official Li, this time you must listen to my advice. This case cannot be touched, really cannot be touched." Li Mu asked, "Why not?" The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head and said, "This case involves too many people. Moreover, it has been decided for more than 10 years. Official Li, why do you want to cause more trouble?" Li Mu looked at the director of the Ministry of Justice. When he wanted to investigate the academy, he thought that the director of the Ministry of Justice had not been so afraid. It seemed that this case was indeed unusual. Li Mu said, "You just need to bring the file over." The director of the Ministry of Justice still looked hesitant. This. Zhou Zhong walked in and said, "Since official Li wants it, then give it to him." The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Zhou Zhong and finally nodded, saying, "Yes." Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, "This case has been over for more than 10 years. Why do you suddenly want to investigate it?" Li Mu looked directly at Zhou Zhong and asked in return, "Why don't you investigate it?" The former owner of the Li mansion was Zhou Zhong's friend. He had more reason than Li Mu to commit a crime for his friend. Zhou Zhong did not answer directly. His eyes stopped on Li Mu and said, "You are really very similar. Even the houses you live in are the same. I don't know if this is a sign from the heavens." Li Mu said, "You haven't answered my question." Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and said, "Don't bring up this case again. I'm doing this for your own good. You've done what many of us can't. Don't let the results of your previous efforts go down the drain." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Next time if you dare to speak rudely in front of the Li mansion, don't blame me for being ruthless." Considering that the former owner of the Li mansion was Zhou Zhong's old friend, Li Mu could forgive him for remembering his old friend on the day before Li Mu's wedding. After today this reason would no longer exist. The director of the Ministry of Justice had already brought over a thick dossier. After Li Mu opened it, he skipped over the series of evidence at the front. In a battle in the imperial court, if one wanted to pin a crime on a person, it didn't depend on what he did but where he stood. If you stood on the right side, then what was wrong was also right. If you stood on the wrong side, then what was right was also wrong. He directly flipped to the testimony section and saw a series of names. The Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xiao Yuan, the Director of the Ministry of Personnel Chen Jian, the Director of the Ministry of Personnel Gao Hong, the Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court Zhou Chuan, the Marquis of Zhongyong Lu Kuan, the Count of Ping and Yao Bin. 14 years ago, it was these people who convicted Li Yi of treason, causing his family to be exterminated. These were the official positions of these people 14 years ago. Li Mu was familiar with most of these names. The Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Xiao Yuan was now the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He was a member of the Xiao royal family. The Director of the Ministry of Personnel Chen Jian was now the Left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The Director of the Ministry of Personnel Gao Hong was now the Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The Vice-Chancellor of the Supreme Court Zhou Chuan was the younger brother of Minister Zhou Jing, the Empress's third uncle and the current Minister of Works. Most of these people after their names were the nobles of Luoyang. They were also the people whose fundamental interests had been affected by Li Yi's reform. 14 years later, most of them had become important figures in the imperial court. Among them, there were nobles, pillars of the new party and members of the old party. Li Mu finally knew why the director of the Ministry of Justice had stopped him. Previously, he had only been messing around with the younger generation of these forces. This time, if he wanted to reverse the verdict for Li Yi, he would have to face the elders of these people. 14 years had passed, and they had already occupied important positions in the imperial court. It was not easy to touch even one of them, let alone all of them. It was tantamount to uprooting both the new party and the old party from the imperial court. Not to mention whether anyone could do it. Even if they could, the imperial court of the Great Zhou would be riddled with holes. It would be a perfect opportunity for foreign enemies to take advantage of. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you still want to investigate?" The Yantai County Commandant's cultivation was at the peak of the 4th realm, much higher than that woman. However, she was only at the 4th realm. How could she know the purple heavenly thunder that could only be used at the 5th realm? Moreover, the power of the purple heavenly thunder was close to that of the mid-5th realm. After the woman killed the Yantai County Commandant, she took off her bamboo hat and stood quietly on the spot, as if she did not intend to resist. One of the consecrators frowned. She wants to die? They had set up an ambush here, but she still killed the Yantai County Commandant right in front of them. Another consecrator flew into a rage out of humiliation. He formed a hand seal and gritted his teeth. "If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." "Stop." A consecrator beside him stopped him and said, "Our duty is only to capture her. Don't do anything unnecessary. Bring her back to the divine capital, and the imperial court will deal with her." The woman looked at them and said, "I won't go back to the divine capital with you. Kill me now." One of the consecrators looked at her coldly and said, "That's not up to you. With the crimes you've committed, it would be too easy for you to die just like that." Clang. A shiny sword appeared in the woman's hand, and she stabbed it at the consecrator. The consecrator easily caught the sword with 2 fingers and sneered. "You want to anger me and make me kill you? Dream on. I don't want to kill you now. You don't want to go to the divine capital, so I'll bring you back to the divine capital." As soon as he finished speaking, the other consecrators spoke as well. "If she dies, we won't be able to report back. Let's attack together. Seal her spiritual power first. Don't give her a chance to kill herself." The divine capital. A day ago, Li Mu asked for half a month's leave from the Empress. Firstly, he wanted to spend time with Lu Hanyan. Secondly, he wanted to adjust his mood. Regarding Li Yi's matter, Li Mu wanted to but was powerless to do so. This made him feel very apologetic. The house that he used to live in was not so comfortable these days. In order to make him feel better, he spread some news about the case. The citizens of the divine capital were initially filled with righteous indignation about the deaths of the 4 court officials. This was a provocation to the imperial court and trampling on the dignity of the Great Zhou's law. However, after learning the truth, the public opinion changed overnight. So he's avenging Lord Li. Lord Li is such a good person. Those people deserve to die. I hope he doesn't get caught. He might be Lord Li's only descendant. It was also at this time that Li Mu realized that the citizens of the divine capital had never forgotten about Li Yi. Even though more than a decade had passed, some of the older citizens still remembered his deeds when he was mentioned. The younger ones were still young and did not know about Li Yi. However, after hearing the stories of the elders, the flames of justice were ignited in their hearts. Lord Li was persecuted by those people back then for the sake of the citizens. Sigh, it's a pity that Lord Li was not born in the imperial court. If only he could join forces with Lord Li Jr., how good would that be? What a pity! Walking hand in hand with Lu Hanyan on the streets, Li Mu could occasionally hear the citizens discussing the events of the past. He finally felt a little better, even though he had already been called Lord Li Jr. by the citizens. Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's hand and said with some regret, "I remember that Lord Li's incident happened exactly a year after I was sold to the music workshop. Lord Li's entire family was wrongly murdered. The workshop owner was so angry that he didn't open the shop for 3 days and didn't allow us to play. There was a younger sister who, because she didn't need to practice the zither, laughed happily and was punished by the workshop owner to stand for an entire day. It was also at that time that I heard about Lord Li from the workshop owner. Who would have thought that the house we're living in now was the house he used to live in?" Li Mu sighed and said, "The day before our wedding was the anniversary of his death." Lu Hanyan said with some regret, "If we had known, we would have pushed it back a few days." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "When the time is right, I want to reverse the verdict for him." Lu Hanyan tightly gripped his hand and said, "No matter what decision you make, I'll be with you." With her at his side, Li Mu's mood improved greatly. He accompanied her to visit a few more shops. Just as the two of them were preparing to return home, there was a sudden commotion on the streets. Many citizens rushed forward. Li Mu walked onto the street and stopped a person. "What's going on?" he asked. That person saw that it was Li Mu and sighed. "It's Lord Li. I heard that a few days ago the murderer of those officials was caught." "Ah, how did she get caught? Those who should be caught aren't caught, but those who shouldn't be caught are randomly caught. The people he killed were all people who deserved to die. The imperial court didn't distinguish between right and wrong. The common people's thoughts were often very simple. They did not understand the law, and most of them would only judge a matter based on the morals in their hearts. Their thoughts were often not in line with the law, but they were in line with the most simple understanding of things as an ordinary person." Lu Hanyan walked out and held Li Mu's hand. "Can you think of a way to save him?" she asked. Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's very difficult. Xiao Yu killed the county magistrate of Yang County because the county magistrate of Yang County killed her. Moreover, she was recognized by the heavens. Even so, the imperial court dared to go against the heavens at the beginning. If the empress hadn't intervened, she wouldn't have been able to escape the fate of having her soul scattered. This case was fundamentally different from Xiao Yu's case. The law didn't encourage revenge. Even the victims could only fight back when their lives were threatened. Revenge after the fact would still be punished by the law. Moreover, he killed 4 officials. The circumstances were extremely bad. There was almost no possibility of being forgiven. A few citizens walked over from afar and spoke with regret. "Ah, she was still caught. I heard that she's Sir Li's daughter. No wonder she wanted to take revenge for Sir Li. Could it be that Sir Li's last bloodline is going to be cut off?" A prisoner's carriage slowly drove over from the front of the street. Parading through the streets was an additional punishment given by the imperial court to those who committed the most heinous crimes. This was a humiliation to them and also a deterrent to those who had bad intentions. Usually, when criminals were paraded through the streets, the citizens would rush up and throw rotten eggs, rotten vegetables, and other things at them. This was also tacitly allowed by the imperial court. However, today, the streets were exceptionally quiet wherever the prisoner's carriage passed. The citizens silently stood on both sides of the street. They didn't say a word as they watched the prisoner's carriage pass. When they looked at the figure on the prisoner's carriage, there was no disgust or hatred in their eyes. There was only pity and anger towards the imperial court. A citizen who didn't know what was going on saw the prisoner's carriage pass by. He quickly ran home and took out a rotten egg that he always kept at home. Just as he was about to throw it, he was seen by a sharp-eyed man. He kicked him to the ground and asked with red eyes, "What the F***ck are you doing?" The person who was pressed to the ground had a puzzled expression. "I'm going to throw a rotten egg." "Why aren't you prepared at all?" the man said angrily. "That's Sir Li's child. I told you to throw it, I told you to throw it. If you don't eat this egg today, I'll beat you to death." Just as the person was about to resist, the rotten egg in his hand was snatched and stuffed into his mouth. Ugh! An unbearable stench filled his mouth and nose. His eyes rolled back and he directly fainted. The prisoner's carriage slowly drove down the street. Beside the prisoner's carriage, two priests from the Department of Priests looked at each other and felt a chill in their hearts. Strange, it was too strange. Usually when the prisoner's carriage passed by, the streets would be in chaos. What was going on today? Why was it so quiet? The two Fifth Realm powerhouses actually couldn't stand the way the commoners looked at them. Li Mu looked at the prisoner's carriage slowly driving down. I also promised him that I would complete his unfinished business. He views this matter as more important than his life. He was silent for a long time. With his back facing Li Qing, he leaned weakly against the bars of the prison cell and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry." A smile appeared on Li Qing's face as she said, "You didn't let anyone down. You have done enough for me." Zhou Zhong's lips moved. Just as he was about to speak, a furious voice suddenly came from outside the prison. "Zhou, what are you doing in there alone? Come out. I'll count to 3. If you don't come out, I'll smash the door. 1. Lord Li, calm down, calm down." Chapter 357. Li Mu counted 1, and the law bell grew louder as if it was about to strike. The door of the prison opened from the inside and Zhou Zhong walked out. He said in a low voice, "What do you want?" Li Mu said coldly, "You sent all the jailers away and stayed in there alone. I want to ask you, what do you want?" Zhou Zhong regained his composure and said lightly, "I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Can't I ask about the case? Why do I have to send everyone away if I want to ask about the case? This is an important case. All unrelated people should leave. Is there a problem?" "You." Li Mu pointed at Zhou Zhong. He seemed to have thought of something and a light flashed in his mind. He said with a look of understanding, "It's you." Zhou Zhong asked calmly, "What do you mean, Lord Li?" Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You are Li Heir, right?" Zhou Zhong's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. He said calmly, "I don't know what Lord Li is talking about." Li Mu didn't know who Li Heir was before. After knowing that Li Qing was Li Yi's daughter, he didn't need to guess who Li Heir was. Zhou Zhong was Li Heir. Zhou Zhong was the one who won the Talisman Dao trial and sent Li Qing to the Fulu school. No wonder Li Mu had never seen the heaven-grade Fulu on his desk. Zhou Zhong himself was a rare Talisman Dao genius, but he never showed it. In this case, the Ministry of Justice didn't investigate the deaths of the Anyang County Magistrate and the Qianhe County Deputy because Zhou Zhong didn't forget about them. At that time he knew that these two cases were done by Li Qing and deliberately suppressed them. The mysteries in Li Mu's heart were solved one by one. However, Zhou Zhong's heart was filled with confusion. Why did Li Mu come here? How did he know about his other identity? What was the relationship between him and Li Qing? Li Mu was so anxious that he didn't want to waste time talking nonsense with Zhou Zhong. He said, "Let me in." Zhou Zhong was still puzzled. He stood in front of Li Mu and shook his head. "She is a wanted criminal of the imperial court," he said. "Visiting the prison is forbidden." Li Mu's face darkened as he said, "Get out of the way or I won't be polite." Zhou Zhong's expression was calm as he asked, "How impolite are you, Lord Li?" Li Mu looked at Zhou Zhong and said, "You forced me to do this." He took out the spirit conch and sent a voice transmission, "Your Majesty." A moment later, Li Mu handed the spirit snail to Zhou Zhong. After Zhou Zhong took it, he heard the voice coming from the spirit conch. He said respectfully to the spirit conch, "Yes, I understand. I will do as you command." He returned the spirit snail to Li Mu and quietly stepped aside. Li Mu walked into the prison. Zhou Zhong was about to follow him in when Li Mu turned around and said, "Close the door. Don't let anyone in, including you." Zhou Zhong frowned and was about to speak when Li Mu took out the spirit conch again and asked, "Do you want His Majesty to talk to you directly?" Zhou Zhong didn't speak again. He closed the door and slowly walked to the assistant minister's office. He looked up and saw the door of the assistant minister's office was closed. Inside the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong extended his hand and flicked out a ray of white light. An image appeared in the air. It was the scene in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. However, as soon as the image appeared, it blurred and nothing could be seen. The heavenly mystery has been blocked. Zhou Zhong's face showed a hint of impatience. He anxiously paced around the office. At the same time, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu had already walked to the deepest part of the prison. The aura he was so familiar with was in the cell around the corner. Li Mu was only one step away from her. It had been a very, very long time since he had been so close to her. Li Mu stood around the corner for a while before slowly taking that step. In the cell, Li Qing bent her knees and leaned against the wall. She raised her head and looked at the door of the cell. A faint smile appeared on her lips and she said, "I thought I wouldn't have the chance to personally congratulate you." Li Mu looked at her and asked, "You already know?" Li Qing hugged her knees and said, "The fireworks that night were very beautiful." Li Mu thought of the inexplicable throbbing in his heart that day. He said, "Sorry, I didn't know the Li estate was your previous home." If he knew the Li estate was her previous home and that the day before their wedding was the anniversary of her family's death, Li Mu would have asked the Empress for a new estate and chosen a new date to hold the wedding. He simply couldn't imagine how Li Qing felt that night. Li Qing shook her head and said, "It doesn't matter. I heard from the people of Luoyang that you did a lot of good things for the people. I'm very happy that you can live in the Li estate. If father knew, he would be happy too." Li Mu took out a piece of fulu and walked through the cell door. He sat down next to Li Qing. Li Qing tilted her head and looked at him. "Promise me one thing." Li Mu said decisively, "No." Li Qing said, "I'm your boss." Li Mu said, "You used to be. Don't meddle in my business." "I'm not meddling in your business. I'm just doing what I should do." Sir Li is devoted to the people. I admire him, respect him, and see him as my role model. What's wrong with me trying to redress the injustice for my role model? Li Mu looked at her pale face and said, "Open your mouth." Li Qing turned her head and said, "Leave. Don't come back." Li Mu pinched her chin and put a pill into her mouth. Her mana was sealed. Li Mu couldn't undo the seal for the time being. He could only use the pill bestowed by the Empress to heal her. Li Qing's lips moved. Li Mu said first, "You know me?" He looked to the side of Zhou Zhong and met a pair of blood-red eyes. Li Mu looked at the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, one of the masterminds who framed Li Qing's father. He finally found an outlet to vent his anger. With a thought, a fulu appeared out of thin air. A faint light flashed on the fulu, and the runes merged into Li Mu's body. A layer of golden armor appeared on his body. Even his fists were covered in golden light. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel realized that something was wrong. His expression changed as he shouted, "Li Mu, what are you doing?" Li Mu's entire body was covered in armor. He gritted his teeth and said, "Chen, I've tolerated you for a long time." As soon as he finished speaking, his body turned into a blur as he flew toward the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel hurriedly blocked and said in anger, "Li Mu, are you crazy?" "I am crazy, but it's all your fault. The humiliation you gave me that day caused me to develop an inner demon. What enmity do you have with me? How dare you frame me like this? I can't take this lying down. Today, I'll pay you back double for the humiliation you gave me that day." The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was shocked. He did not expect that his mocking words that day would cause Li Mu to develop an inner demon. This made him angry but also pleased. It would be best if the inner demon took over his mind and turned him into a lunatic. His Majesty would not dote on a lunatic. The only outcome of having one's mind taken over by the inner demon was death. However, this trace of happiness in his heart quickly disappeared without a trace. He did not know what fulu Li Mu had used, but the combat power he displayed was not weaker than a creation realm cultivator. In close combat, the left assistant minister could only passively defend. He did not even have the chance to use any spells. After taking a few punches, he looked at Zhou Zhong and shouted, "Lord Zhou, what are you waiting for?" Zhou Zhong shouted back, "Lord Qin, I'm coming to help you now." With that, he flew up but was kicked away by Li Mu. His body flew into a yamen and did not appear again. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel knew that Zhou Zhong was no match for Li Mu, so he fled out of the Ministry of Justice in a panic. He did not believe that Li Mu would dare to attack him in front of so many people in the divine capital. After the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhou Zhong walked out of a yamen. He patted the dust off his body and walked back into the Ministry of Justice's prison. In the cell, Li Qing stood up and looked at him. She asked, "What happened outside?" Zhou Zhong said, "It's nothing. Li Mu and Xianxia are fighting." Li Qing said anxiously, Go and stop him, don't worry. As long as he doesn't kill Qin Jian will be the unlucky one in the end. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Qin, who was still nervous, and said, although he often did some crazy things in the past, he was still rational. For you, he even lost his rationality. Now, can you tell me what's the relationship between you two? Chapter 358. Outside the Ministry of Justice, on the streets of Divine Capital. You're crazy. You're really crazy. Li Mu, do you know the consequences of your actions? Li, I won't let you get away with this. The Assistant Minister of Personnel's expression changed from shock to fear. He did not expect Li Mu to attack him on the streets in front of the citizens of Divine Capital. Is this lunatic not afraid of the Imperial Court's punishment? The citizens on the streets were also dumbfounded by what they saw. Who else could it be other than young Master Li, whose entire body was shining with golden light and was currently chasing after someone? Upon closer inspection, the person being beaten was wearing a high-ranked official's uniform. He seemed to be the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The commoners did not know much about the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. They only knew that he held a high position and was an important figure in the old party. Over the past few days, after the inside story of Lord Li's case was uncovered, they found out that this person was the mastermind who framed Lord Li. With that merit, he had risen to the top and was now sitting in Lord Li's position. It was absolutely detestable. Seeing Li Mu chasing after him and beating him up, the citizens felt an indescribable satisfaction. Well done. This kind of person will only cause trouble if we let him live. Let's just beat him to death. Sai, if we beat him to death, Li Mu will also get into big trouble. It's better to beat him up to vent our anger. Why is Li Mu so impulsive today? Is he also speaking up for Li Mu? The citizens did not dare to speak loudly. They could only whisper. Above their heads, waves of dermic powers quickly attracted a few figures. Stop. How dare you fight here? Stop it. A few generals in silver armor quickly flew over. They were about to stop the fight when they were surprised to find that it was the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and Li Mu from the Secretariat who were fighting in the sky above Luoyang. They did not know how to deal with it. If two cultivators dared to fight in Divine Capital, they would have been taken down long ago. But what was the reason for these two important officials to fight in front of so many people? Li Mu, the Secretary of the Secretariat, was still in good condition. Only his hair was a little messy, but Qin Jian, the left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, had a bloody nose and a swollen face. Seeing the Imperial Guard generals who guarded Divine Capital arrive, Li Mu did not make things difficult for them. He stopped and quietly floated in the air. The Assistant Minister of Personnel covered his bruised eyes. He was furious. What are you waiting for? Take him down. The Imperial Guard could not deal with the officials fighting. One general looked at the two officials and said, Sirs, please follow us to His Majesty's side. Zhou Yi said, no reason can be a reason for you to beat up an important official of the Imperial Court. Li Mu raised his head and said, on the 10th day of the 10th month, the left Assistant Minister of Personnel, Qin Jian, verbally humiliated me in the Ministry of Personnel, causing me to develop an inner demon. Your Majesty, please show me the scene from that day. Zhou Yi waved his hand and sent out a ray of white light. An image appeared above the heads of everyone in the hall. In the image, Li Mu was about to leave the Ministry of Personnel when the Assistant Minister of Personnel suddenly said, Lord Li, you may not know this, but the Li residence you are living in now is the residence of that guilty official. The day before your wedding is the anniversary of the death of that guilty official's family. I wonder if you heard the wails of their ghosts on your wedding night. Seeing this scene, the Assistant Minister of Personnel's face paled. The officials in the hall finally understood why the Assistant Minister of Personnel had met such an end. Even if it was an ordinary person's wedding, there would still be some good luck. It was very taboo for people to say anything inauspicious. Who could tolerate such verbal humiliation on the day of someone's wedding? Moreover, this kind of humiliation had caused the person involved to develop an inner demon. In the cultivation world, this was probably not something that could be settled with a simple beating. Ruining the path of cultivation was a great enmity that would not rest until one of them was dead. Zhou Yi looked at the Assistant Minister of Personnel and asked, Do you have anything else to say? The Assistant Minister of Personnel hurriedly explained, Your Majesty, I was muddle-headed at that time, Zhou Yi said coldly, Being muddle-headed is not an excuse for ruining the Tao hearts of your colleagues. The Assistant Minister of Personnel hurriedly knelt and said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, please forgive me." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "Assistant Minister of Personnel Chen Jian humiliated a colleague. The consequences are serious. His moral conduct is lacking. He will be suspended from his duties for a month and his salary will be deducted for half a year." The ministers in the hall glanced at the Assistant Minister of Personnel and sighed in their hearts. Chen Jian really had no foresight. Li Mu was the favored minister of the Empress. Chen Jian dared to drag Li Mu to meet the Empress when he knew that he was in the wrong. Wasn't he walking right into a trap? The officials of the 3 provinces still had to report to the political leaders. After the Empress concluded the case of Li Mu and Chen Jian, the 2 of them walked out of Xiangyang Palace. Today's humiliation will be avenged in the future. Chen Jian took one last look at Li Mu, covered his face with his sleeves and left in a hurry. Li Mu walked slowly in the palace, but his thoughts were running fast. He and Li Yi shared the same residence. According to his original plan, he would take the long view and plan step by step. When the time was right, he would overturn the case for Li Yi and clear his name. This way he could minimize the impact on the situation in the imperial court and would not cause too much trouble for the Empress. As for the person who caused these cases, he could only try his best to save his life. Even if he did not succeed in the end, he had already done what he should have done. Regarding this matter, he did not ask for anything other than peace of mind. This was the most rational thing to do. However, when he saw the figure in the prisoner carriage, he threw all rationality and plans to the back of his mind. The first thing he needed to do now was to get Li Qing out of the Ministry of Justice. Although Zhou Zhong was in the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong happened to be the person Li Mu did not trust the most. Li Mu knew very well that Zhou Zhong had actually given up on her just now. In Zhou Zhong's heart, there was something that he thought was more noble. After thinking for a while, the only person Li Mu could trust at the moment was Zhang Chun. The power of the Zongjing Temple had been further expanded recently. The cases that the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court could handle were handled by the Zongjing Temple. The cases that the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court could not handle were handled by the Zongjing Temple. Li Mu first returned to the Secretariat and drafted an official document with the identity of the Secretariat's secretary. After that, he asked Mr. Mei to ask the Empress to temporarily interrupt the debriefing of the officials of the 3 provinces and put the Empress's seal on the document. After that, he went to the Zongjing Temple and handed the document to Zhang Chun, asking him to transfer Li Qing from the Ministry of Justice to the Zongjing Temple. Although the Ministry of Justice and the Zongjing Temple were controlled by the old party, at least Zhang Chun was in the Zongjing Temple. In the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong received the document and said to the director of the Ministry of Justice, "Open the prison." Soon, a carriage drove out of the Ministry of Justice and slowly into the palace, heading in the direction of the Zongjing Temple. The Zongjing Temple mostly dealt with the important officials of the imperial court and the royal family's disciples. In consideration of their dignity, they did not want the people to throw vegetables and eggs at them when they were escorting important people through the streets. The prisoner carriage of the Zongjing Temple was a modified carriage, sealed and hidden. In the Zongjing Temple, Prince Shou was lying in the courtyard of the Zongjing Temple, basking in the sun. When he saw the carriage enter the Zongjing Temple, he asked, "Who committed the crime this time?" Minister Feng, who was squatting beside him and fanning him, said, "It's Li Yi's daughter. It's said that she killed 5 officials outside and was brought back to Fairy's capital by the Office of Worship. She's waiting for trial, Li Yi?" Prince Shou narrowed his eyes as if he was lost in his memories. Minister Feng said, "It's that Li Yi who caused a huge ruckus in Fairy's capital more than 10 years ago. Later, his entire family was executed. I didn't expect that there would be one left out. Li Yi from more than 10 years ago and now Li Mu. Why is this surnamed Li not to be trifled with?" As he spoke, he thought of something and said to Prince Shou, "Your Highness, you have to take care of that Zhang Chun. I don't know what he's thinking, but he arranged for Li Yi's daughter's cell to be the same as the wedding room. Not only did he choose the largest and most spacious cell, he even arranged for people to clean it inside and out. He changed the big bed, brand new bedding and even a mirror and dressing table. He even locked all the prisoners around that cell elsewhere and hung curtains around the cell. How is this a prison at the Zongjing Temple? She's clearly a young mistress. I just want to bask in the sun. Why do you have so much nonsense to say?" Prince Shou glared at him and said, "Are you very free? If you have nothing to do, go wash all the toilets. Don't bother me here." Minister Feng was stunned and said, Your Highness, Prince Shou said angrily, go. In the Zongjing Temple's outhouse, Minister Feng was washing the toilets gloomily. In the courtyard, Prince Shou was lying on a rocking chair with his hands behind his head. He sighed and said, what a pity. Why are young people so impulsive? In the Zongjing Temple's prison, Zhang Chun stood outside the cell and shook his head. I didn't expect Constable Li to be Lord Li Yi's daughter. Back then I also admired him very much. Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun and said, I'll leave the boss to you. Zhang Chun said, don't worry. As long as she's in the Zongjing Temple, no one will dare to touch her. He looked at Li Mu and asked, what do you plan to do? Whether it's to redress Lord Li Yi's grievances or to exonerate Li Qing's crimes, it's not that simple. At present, Li Qing's matter was naturally Li Mu's greatest concern and also the most urgent matter. But if he wanted to save Li Qing, he had to redress her father's case first. If Li Qing's identity was still that of a treacherous official who had colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country, then what Li Qing did was a complete blow and revenge. She had killed many officials of the imperial court and should be sentenced to death according to the law. If Li Mu insisted on saving her, he would be going against the law and above the law. In this way, what difference would there be between him and those people he despised? However, if Li Yi's identity was that of a loyal official who was set up by a villain and had his entire family exterminated, then his daughter avenged his family's death. Even if it was against the law, it would still be righteous. Under the premise that the imperial court had lost its righteousness, there was still mercy outside the law. After all, the 4 managers of the Ministry of Personnel were the ones who had directly framed Li Yi. They had framed a 4th-rank official of the imperial court and caused his family to be killed unjustly. These 4 people were already sentenced to death. Under such circumstances, Li Mu had a slight chance of saving Li Qing. And the premise of all this was that he had to redress Li Yi's case first. Li Mu walked into the cell in front of him. The shackles on Li Qing's body had already been removed and her mana had also been unsealed. Li Mu walked to her side and sat down. He said, give me your hand. Li Qing slowly handed her hand to Li Mu. His hand emitted a gentle golden light which slowly entered Li Qing's body. Li Mu said, I can't get you out right away. I may have to trouble you for a while. Stay here for now. Li Qing looked around and said, this should be the best room I've ever stayed in. Li Mu looked at her and said, don't worry, I will investigate the matter of that year as soon as possible and clear Lord Li's name. Li Qing shook her head slightly and said, now I understand that my father doesn't want revenge. He and Uncle Zhou have more important things to do. I hope you can help my father finish what he couldn't before he died. Don't ruin your future for me. Li Mu smiled and said, only children make choices. I choose both. He looked into Li Qing's eyes and said, someone has already done the first thing. If I can't save you, then the second thing is meaningless to me. Let Zhou Zhong finish his and Uncle Zhou's dreams. At worst, I'll take you back to Fulu School. We don't want to stay in Fairy's capital anymore. As Li Mu finished speaking, he heard Mr. May's voice. He turned around and saw the Empress and Mr. May standing at the door. The Empress looked at him indifferently and turned to leave. Seeing Mr. May winking at him, Li Mu looked at Li Qing and said, I'll go out for a while. After comforting Li Qing, Li Mu hurried out of Zongjing Temple, but he couldn't see the Empress anymore. He jogged to the entrance of Jianghu Palace. Mr. May looked inside the palace and gave him a look. Li Mu walked slowly into the palace and looked at the Empress who had her back to him. He whispered, Your Majesty. Zhou Qiong said indifferently, why did you come looking for me? Go back to your talisman school. Being a second-generation disciple of the talisman school is much better than being a subordinate of mine. After comforting one, he had to comfort the other. Li Mu wanted to slap his own mouth a few times. The only thing that can save that girl is this gold medal. She killed so many officials. No one can save her. Unless you have the ability to reverse the verdict for her father and let His Majesty announce this case to the world. Then, let the people of the 36 counties write a blood letter to plead for her so that the imperial court won't dare to kill her. He looked at Li Mu mockingly and asked, Do you have the ability? Chapter 359. Li Mu and Zhang Chun walked out of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and left the Imperial Palace together. Zhang Chun was silent for a long time before he suddenly asked, Li Mu, did you grow up in Yangqiu County? Li Mu was thinking about something else, so he asked casually, why are you asking this? Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, I'm just asking. By the way, why do you think King Shou is so good to you? Li Mu shook his head and said, who knows? Li Mu couldn't think of a reason why King Shou would always give them pointers at critical moments. Maybe he was just doing it for justice. After all, human nature was complicated, and you can't label a person as good or evil just because of their background or faction. Regardless of the reason, King Shou's words did make Li Mu suddenly see the light. What does the continuation of the Great Zhou rely on? It's not the imperial court, not the imperial family, but the people. It's the psyche power of the people. What the imperial court is most afraid of is losing the people's hearts. They may not care about a city, but they won't care about a county, 10 counties, or even 36 counties. The law of the Great Zhou is to protect the weak and the people, but this is only on the surface. The existence of the law is to maintain the rule of the imperial court. Because only when the people live and work in peace can the psyche power be continuously produced, the emperor's qi can be nurtured, and the upper realm powerhouses of the imperial family can be endlessly produced, ensuring the stability of the country. No matter how fierce the imperial court is, the prosperity of the Great Zhou will always be the goal of everyone. King Shou's words can be said to have awakened the people in the dream. Li Mu walked out of the imperial palace. Unexpectedly, there were already many people outside the imperial palace. Seeing Li Mu walk out, they immediately surrounded him. Lord Li, how is it? His Majesty didn't punish you, right? Lord Li was too impulsive. You shouldn't have fought with that person. Isn't this dirtying your hands? Feeling the concern of the people, Li Mu smiled and said, everyone don't worry. His Majesty is a righteous person. How could he punish me? A man breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, that's good, that's good. Lord Li is worthy of being His Majesty's favorite minister. If I knew this would happen, I would have hit him harder. Break his legs. This kind of treacherous person, it's not too much. Lord Li's family, he will die a horrible death. Among the crowd, the Lord Li Mu, Lord Li is Lord Li E, Lord Li was Li is? The crowd also looked at Li Mu. With a profound look in his eyes, Li Mu said, official Li E is the role model of our generation. I know. Lord is brave. Lord Li died. S. Li Li's house. Even now we still can't take it lying down. The crowd was filled with righteous indignation as they spoke one after another. At this moment, the man bit his lip and suddenly looked at Li Mu. He said, my lord, can you save Lord Li's daughter? She's Lord Li's only child left in this world. Stop talking. The middle-aged man glared at him and said in a deep voice, do you want to kill, sir? Sighs could be heard from the crowd. Yes, Lord Li was the enemy of all the nobles back then. Now those people are in high positions. Lord Li, it's best not to provoke them. Forget it. Lord Li, you can go ahead. You can't follow in Lord Li's footsteps. The man's eyes were filled with tears. He choked and said, if it wasn't for Lord Li, my family would have died in Fairy's capital. I can't watch Lord Li die. His voice was mournful. The people around Li Mu lowered their heads. Their eyes were filled with suppressed anger. Lord Li had served the people wholeheartedly, but his family was ruined and his descendants were about to die. On the other hand, those who had framed him had become heroes, enjoying endless glory and wealth, riding on the heads of the common people and abusing them. They could do nothing about it except feel indignant. A man of 7 feet could not help but sob in front of everyone on the streets of Fairy's capital. No one laughed. Everyone's mood was very heavy. The man lowered his head. As he sobbed and trembled, a pair of hands landed gently on his shoulders. Li Mu patted him on the shoulder and said, don't worry. Lord Li won't die. He won't be wronged forever. The man raised his head and said in shock, Lord Li? Lord Li? Lord Li? The people looked at Li Mu. They seemed to have realized something. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Li residence. When Li Mu walked through the door, Xianxia and Yuxinzi in the courtyard sensed something strange. Xianxia turned to look. The moment Li Mu stepped into the courtyard, he felt as if the world was pressing down on him. This was a force. It was a force that should not exist on a fourth realm cultivator. Yuxinzi said in disbelief, his psychokinesis has already formed a force. No wonder his cultivation progress is so fast. Very few people can complete psychokinesis cultivation. Li Mu retracted his newly acquired psychokinesis back into his body. Lu Hanyan walked over quickly and asked, how is it? Li Mu shook his head and said, "She's safe for now. But to save her we have to think about it carefully." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and asked, "Can't we ask Her Majesty to pardon her?" Li Mu said, "It's not that easy. But it's okay. Her Majesty has already agreed to let me reinvestigate Lord Li Yi's case. After Lord Li's case is overturned, things will be much simpler. Actually, he only begged the Empress today to show her his attitude. This case involved too many people. Whether Li Mu proposed it or the Empress ordered it, they would definitely encounter great resistance.